Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Monday. Got some great news today, folks. This is the last week until Notre Dame's bye week that we are not prepping for a game. You heard that correct. That's not satire. That's not, thank goodness. It's been a long off season, and this is going to be just an exceptionally fun week of shows. We're previewing a bunch of different things, and the next week, it's game week. We're breaking down Wisconsin. We're talking about matchups that matter. We're giving game predictions. So it's almost here. It's been 268 days since we've seen Notre Dame play football, and that is about 267 days too long. And I'm ready for this season to get going, man. But this is going to be a really, really fun week of shows, man.
Yeah, I'm excited about it, Trev. You know, we put this up on the board this weekend to kind of tell everybody kind of what we're doing. And look, this is going to be a really jam-packed week. We talked a little bit about it last week, a little bit, but here's what we're doing. So today, we're going to preview the ACC and the Big 12, which we talked about last week. But before we kick that show off, we're going to have a conversation about the opportunity that Notre Dame has this year to kind of make a statement against both leagues and why that matters and why we're having that conversation. We'll have a similar conversation tomorrow about Notre Dame against the Big Ten because they have 3 Big Ten opponents this year. And then kind of Notre Dame's opportunities against the SEC this year, and which are a little bit different and may come in the postseason. And then there's some comparison stuff to kind of talk about. Then tomorrow we will preview the Big Ten and the SEC and make our conference predictions. And it's not just the teams. We're going to do a little bit different this year. Like last year, we kind of like talked through all the teams, and it was like a 2-something hour long show. We're going to give you our rankings, predictions, and then kind of talk very briefly about some of the teams because we've talked so much about a lot of these teams. But then we're also going to have some fun. We're going to pick like our superlatives, top players, top linemen, top skill, top coach of the year, all that kind of stuff in the different leagues. It's going to be a fun conversation. And then our mailbag today will be you guys asking us questions about the topics today. So ACC, Big 12, our thoughts on Notre Dame matchups against those teams. So we'll have that conversation as well. Then tomorrow, as I said, we'll do Big 12 or Big 10 SEC. And then Wednesday, Trev, we kind of get into a little bit bigger picture. We'll do some Notre Dame prediction show. We'll pick top players, superlatives, rookie of the year, top linemen, all that fun stuff. Then we'll make our college football predictions for top players, Heisman Trophy, top quarterback, top running back, all that kind of stuff. Coach of the year, have some fun. Thursday will be our bold prediction show, which we're very excited about. It's a lot harder to come up with bold predictions this year because of the optimism of the team. And then Friday, Trevor, no mailbag this week because Friday, we're finally doing our big reveal. We're going to start kicking things off with our Notre Dame predictions. We're going to go game by game, have some predictions of our season record. Then we will do our college football playoff prediction show. We will reveal our preseason top 25. Doing something really fun this year that's going to be for IB premium members only. We're going to have an IB top 25. So Trevor and I will come up with a preseason top 25, which we will reveal to you on Friday. We are not going to go through and break down the top 25 like we did last year. We're just going to literally, here's our top 25. Okay. And then we will make our playoff predictions out of that. Preseason is where teams should be on game one. Playoff is where we think teams will end up at the end of the year. But we're also going to do an IB top 25. So we'll have our preseason ranking, and then each week, IB members who choose to sign up, this is premium members who choose to sign up, get to vote in their top 25. And I'll send out some criteria this week to everybody, kind of let everybody know. And then on Sunday afternoon, we'll release an IB top 25. And that the fans get to vote on. So we all love to bash the AP and the coaches' top 25. So you know what? We're going to do our own. And you know what I always say, Trev, if you're going to bash somebody for something, then you better be willing to do it. And that's what we're going to do. So, and that's what this week is going to be all about. So I'm super, super excited about it. Super excited about it. And as I said, mailbag questions today. We will have a mailbag, but we'd like to keep those questions directed at the topic of today, which is Notre Dame versus the ACC, Notre Dame versus the Big 12, plus our predictions for the ACC Big 12. And we'd love to hear, some of you love following college football as a whole, not just Notre Dame. Those that do, we'd love to hear your predictions today for the ACC and the Big 12. So going to be a jam-packed show today, Trev, and we're going to do a lot more college football analysis during the year as well as segments on our weekly shows. We'll have a little something on college football on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday as one of our segments on those days. So I am fired up and I'm absolutely ready to go today.
This is the time of the preseason now. I'm excited that I can stop calling it the offseason and really start calling it the preseason. I mean, football is going to be on our TVs on Saturday, so really the preseason is winding down as is. But this is the time of the season where it's a lot of fun. You're giving all your predictions, and yeah, we talk about matchups and but I also love doing these types of shows for the storylines as well. And I think that's going to be a ton of fun. But before we break down the ACC and before we dive into the Big 12, we're going to look at this from a Notre Dame lens for a second. And we're going to talk about what this means for Notre Dame, because obviously we are Irish Breakdown. We like to cover a lot of national topics, but we also need to work in and talk about what Notre Dame's implications are for this. Obviously, their relationship with the ACC is in a very interesting spot, given everything that happened this past season. Their relationship with the Big 12, honestly, is relatively new because this isn't a team or a conference that they see on their schedule all the time. So this is going to be one that I'll be very interested to dive into. But when you start talking about Notre Dame and what they have the opportunity to do against the ACC, I mean, really, the conversation starts around getting back on track. And they've done a better job at that. I believe Marcus Freeman had losses to ACC teams. Let's see, Stanford wasn't in the ACC in 2022. 23, they lost to Louisville.
Yep.
24, they
and
were
Clemson.
Undefeated. Yep.
Clemson.
And Clemson. And then 24, they went unscathed in the ACC. And then obviously last year they lost to Miami in the opener. So now this is a chance for Notre Dame to kind of get back on track because for the better part, from what was it? From post Miami in 2017 to I think into like 2020 or 2021, they might have went undefeated against the ACC.
In the regular season.
Yeah, the regular season.
Yeah, they didn't lose to anybody. So they lost to Miami in 17. That was the last loss that they suffered in the regular season to an ACC team until they lost to Louisville in 2023. Now, they lost to Clemson in the Cotton Bowl. They lost to Clemson in the ACC championship game in 2020. So they had defeats, but in the regular season. And we talked before the 24 season about how important it was to kind of regain dominance over the ACC. And to a degree, over the last 2 years, they've done that, Trev. You look at what they did, obviously, in 2023. They had or 2024, excuse me. So they lost to Clemson late in 2023. And that was a tough loss. They went on to win. They beat Wake Forest that next week. Beat Stanford a week after that, but Stanford wasn't in the ACC yet. So you went 1-0 against the ACC that kind of post Clemson. And then last year, 2024, they beat Louisville. They beat Stanford, who last year was Stanford's first year in the ACC, correct? They were, or was it? It was last year. 2024 was their first year. Okay. So you beat Louisville, beat Stanford, beat Georgia Tech, beat Florida State, beat Virginia. So that got them to 6 in a row. And then you've got a chance in 27 or 25. They beat NC State, beat Boston College, beat Pitt, beat Syracuse, and then beat Stanford. And with the exception of the Louisville game, Trev, all those wins were convincing wins. I mean, it's 31-13, 52-3, 35-14. You look at last year, you've got 36-7, you've got 25-10, 37-15, 70-7, but right in the middle of all that is the loss to Miami. So while you have gotten back to dominating the majority of the ACC, you got beat by their big dog last year, and that's why their big dog made the college football playoff, and you didn't. And so for Notre Dame, they're in this unique situation where they're a somewhat affiliate with the ACC. And the whole motto for this team is what? Leave no doubt, right? And that's the whole mantra. So last year, where'd that come from? Because you left out. You allowed the committee. You allowed the ACC. Notre Dame can be pissed about how the ACC did them dirty. And we're pissed about that. I'm still pissed about that. Instead of saying, hey, Miami should be in and Notre Dame should be in, Bama should be out, instead of replaying on loop the Alabama-Florida State game over and over and over and over again on the ACC network, they played Notre Dame and Miami, right? So I am upset about that. But why did the ACC network keep playing that game? Because Notre Dame lost. Had Notre Dame handled their business, we're not having this conversation about, Notre Dame's revenge tour. We're talking about, hey, whatever Notre Dame would have done in the postseason. So when you're in this situation where you're fighting for limited playoff spots, you've got to be a team that goes out there and says, hey, we're going to get opportunities against other leagues. We have to dominate those opportunities, and there's no league that's more important for Notre Dame to dominate than the ACC. And dominate two ways. One is to win all your games. That makes it easy. And two is to dominate in that you play anybody outside that top 2 or 3, they need to be beat downs. That's what it needs to be like. Show your supremacy over that league by not just winning your games, but winning your games in convincing fashion where there's no question who's better, Notre Dame or anybody in the ACC. Now, what's different this year is there will be an ACC team in the college football playoff this year. That's going to happen because of the new rules. So everybody wants to focus on the new rule that affects Notre Dame. What people aren't talking about, because I just think some people just don't know because they just repeat what they're told to repeat on social media. There's also automatic bids now for the Power 4 champions. That's also part of the new memorandum of understanding, right? So if last year's rules were if this year's rules applied last year, Duke's in the playoff, Miami's out. So there will be a team in there, but you and I believe, Trev, as we'll get to later, that there's some second and third ACC teams, maybe even 4, that could be jockeying for an at-large spot. Well, that could come down to Notre Dame versus them, potentially, if Notre Dame doesn't handle their business. And so if Notre Dame does handle their business, it's like, well, you can get a second ACC team in there, but they're not going to be competing against Notre Dame. And that's the opportunity that Notre Dame has with the ACC this year. We'll talk about the Big 12 in a little bit, but Notre Dame's got to get back to dominating the ACC. That means blowing out the teams beneath them, but then also handling business against the better teams on the schedule as well.
That's a really good point, and that's a unique piece about their ACC schedule in the regular season this year. In years past, when they were dominating the ACC, because the one thing that I will hand Brian Kelly is in the regular season, he was able to put the ACC in a locker, per se. I mean, you don't do that and go on the run that you went on from 2017 to when he left after the 2021 season without showing some level of domination over the ACC as a conference. But the thing that's on the table for them this year... And
real quick, let me just say this. That includes a win over number... Like, a lot of it was beating up on a lot of bad ACC teams. All right, let's be honest about that. But that included a win over number 1 Clemson in 2020 as well. And you can't take that away.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the one thing that is on the table for them this season is they have the opportunity to play multiple top teams in the ACC this year. In Miami on November 7th and SMU in November 21. To your point, Brian, a lot of those years they're playing Virginia when they were bad. They were playing Stanford, who's been bad. They're playing Pitt, who's historically been not that great against Notre Dame since Pat Narduzzi took over. They're playing Wake. They're playing Duke. So they've picked up good wins, but very rarely have they played 2 of the top teams from the ACC in the same year. Obviously, they get SMU on Senior Day, and then the big game against Miami on November 7th, which right now FanDuel has Notre Dame favored in right now by 6.5 points. Granted, like we mentioned before, that line is definitely subject to change as the season goes along, and I predict that it will. But if there's going to be a year that Notre Dame reestablishes dominance, I think it's going to carry some weight this year because it's not, well, yeah, you went 5-0 or 6-0 against the ACC, but who'd you play out of the ACC? And it's not like their whole schedule is Wake, Boston College, Syracuse, Pitt, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. You're also throwing in Miami and SMU. So the opportunity this year, in the spirit of leaving no doubt, not only will they be able to say, hey, we reclaimed dominance over the ACC, we did it by beating 2 of their top teams. And I think that's huge.
That's a big part of this storyline for Notre Dame, Trev, is it's not just about beating, like you said, a bunch of bad ACC teams. And you didn't get to play Louisville, you didn't get to play Clemson, you didn't get to play SMU or Miami, or maybe you only play one of those 4 teams. That's a different story. And we've seen a lot of years like that for Notre Dame where they beat up on the ACC, but you're like, who'd you play that was good? And you're like, well, I mean, so there's that team was ranked in the preseason. Yeah, they finished 5-7 though. I mean, that's kind of the thing. Well, Florida State was coming off of a 13-1 season in 2023, so they were preseason whatever. Yeah, but they went 2-10. It doesn't matter what they were. You had to spin it. What I like about this year, Trev, is barring teams just not being what we think they're going to be, you're getting at least two really, really good ACC teams that national analysts predict to be playoff teams. Not just us, not just Notre Dame fans, because we haven't released ours yet. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to be shocked that we have Miami in the playoff and give away too much. But SMU's competing for a playoff spot. I've seen a couple that had Louisville as the second ACC team in this year. I've even seen a couple that had Clemson, kind of rallying back and making a playoff appearance this year. So, when you look at it, Trev, there's no doubt that the league this year in the ACC has got some really quality teams at the top, and fortunately for Notre Dame, they get a chance to play those teams. So which fits in very well with the leave no doubt mantra, because it's not like, well, yeah, listen, like last year we started getting into this, well, Notre Dame beat Syracuse more convincingly than Miami did, and they beat Stanford more convincing. If you got to take away Pitt's, their last touchdown against Pitt, and if you take that away, Miami scored late, and then Pitt scored late against Notre Dame. So in reality, for the first 55 minutes, Notre Dame is more impressive than that's irrelevant, because you get a chance to handle your business against Miami this year. It's irrelevant what you did compared to SMU, because you get a chance to handle your business head-to-head. Now, there is a world in which if Notre Dame doesn't handle their business in other games, we're back to, if they do beat Miami or SMU, we're back to the conversation we had last year, but in reverse. Especially SMU, because honestly, I don't think Miami's schedule's tough enough to where you can be like, hey, I know that they went 11-1 and lost to Notre Dame, and then Notre Dame lost to somebody, but Miami played Miami's schedule's worse than Notre Dame's is. But you never know. What some teams on their schedule may be better than we think, and that type of thing. So you don't want to be in a situation where, hey, listen, you're comparing how you beat these teams compared to how Miami or SMU or Louisville or Clemson beat those teams. You get a chance to handle your business. Say, well, we went undefeated against the ACC. Who else in the ACC can say that? And oh, by the way, we beat your number 1 and number 2 team, or your number 1 and number 3 team, and that type of thing. And I think that's the statement, because people can talk. There's going to be a lot of talk about Notre Dame playing a weak schedule. That's not going away. And they're going to ignore a lot of other teams that have weak schedules. You and I are going through we're predicting every single college football game this year that involves a Power 4 team. And I'm like, gosh, there's a lot of bad schedules out there. Now, the only one that ever gets talked about is Notre Dame's. But it is what it is. But you do have a chance to play against teams that could be playing on Championship Saturday. And that will matter. That wasn't the case last year. Notre Dame wasn't playing anybody that didn't play anybody that played on Championship Saturday last year. I don't believe, Trev. I don't think anybody that Notre Dame did, right? The year before there were, but this year they're not. And you've got a chance to, because Army the year before, I believe, played in the, no.
Yeah, I was thinking if Navy played for the AAC last year, but they didn't. So
it was like, was it Tulane and South Florida? I think.
Yeah, I believe so.
Tulane and somebody. Tulane won. So, but yeah, that's the opportunity. It's you get a chance to Boise State. That's right, Boise State. Thank you, Quinn. To Central Irish, appreciate that. Boise played for the Mountain West Championship. So that's when you look at it, Trev, and say you got a chance to be saying, "Hey, we played that team, that team, that team, and that team, and look how we did."
And to your point about spin, with Boise State being the only team that played on Championship Saturday, that kind of backs our point. It's right. A lot less. it's a lot less boisterous. We're like, oh, Notre Dame did play somebody on Championship Saturday. It was Boise State in the Mountain West, right. Baby. And it's like, yeah. Or this year, Miami and SMU very well could square off for the ACC title this year. BYU, kind of switching over to talking about what's at stake here at the Big 12. BYU is another team that is knocking on the door of fighting for the Big 12 Conference Championship again and has the opportunity to play. Now, the outlook with Notre Dame in the Big 12 is interesting because there's definitely not as much history there compared to what they have with the ACC. But that kind of fuels this discussion because now Notre Dame is in a spot where it's almost like a statement opportunity against the Big 12 with this game because it's not like, hey, they get to play the Big 12 this year. Oh, okay, who do they got? Oh, they got the Kansas Jayhawks.
Right.
It's like, okay, scrappy team. They don't have Jalen Daniels anymore. Andy Kotelnicki comes back. We'll see what they're made of. No, it's like, hey, they're playing a team that had just as much of a discussion to be in the college football playoff last year out of the Big 12 as what Notre Dame did over Alabama.
Or even like a Utah team that was good last year, but they lost their head coach and they lost a bunch of players and assistant coaches. And you're like, yeah, but how good are they really going to be? Yeah, in a team that in each of the last 2 years has gone into November with an opportunity to compete to earn a college football playoff berth.
Yep.
And I think they got knocked out by the team that made it both years because they lost to Arizona State in November because they were in control of their own destiny. Because remember, BYU's only loss, they had only one loss in their conference, and they had a win over a playoff team in SMU because they had beat SMU at SMU early in the season. They were in control of their own destiny, and I believe it was Arizona State beat them. I'm going to pull it up real quick just to refresh my memory real quick. But yeah, they lost to Kansas in November. So like they went into November undefeated, complete control of their own destiny, lost at home to Kansas. Even with that loss, they were still in control of their own destiny if they could have beat Arizona State and Houston in the last 2 games. But they lost Arizona State on the road by 5, and that allowed the Sun Devils to because it was funny, we talked about this at the time. Arizona State had like, of the teams with a shot, they had like some of the lowest odds, and they ended up getting it done and beating BYU. And then last year, obviously, they made it to the Big 12 championship game and just got beat by Texas Tech. So this is a team that the last 2 years has been one of the best teams in the Big 12. They have a chance this year. I saw ESPN came out with their power rankings this weekend. Did you see that, Trev? Did you see? Actually, you did because I sent it to you and we talked about it. Sorry, been a long weekend.
Good, brother.
They had Notre Dame 3, which you expect. I think it was like Ohio State 1, Georgia 2, Notre Dame 3, Oregon 4, Texas 5. No surprise, right? Miami 7, no surprise. Miami was 7 in both AP and coaches poll, right? No big surprise. They had BYU 6. Now, I think that's too high for BYU. But the point is, you've got these people that have that think very highly of BYU. I believe that in ESPN also had their college football playoff predictions. Kyle Bonagora and Mark Schlabach did their playoff predictions, and they both had BYU in the playoffs. Kyle Bonagora had him as an 11 seed, but Mark Schlabach had him as a 6 seed, playing Texas A&M and winning. And then they both set up rematches with Notre Dame. Yeah, I think Bonagora had Notre Dame playing Miami in the quarters, and then Schlabach had him playing BYU in the quarters, which is lame. But the point is, that's a team that a lot of people are thinking, with Texas Tech's quarterback issues, some people believe this is the team to beat in the Big 12. I think BYU has to prove that because they've been one of the best teams. They were better than Texas Tech 2 years ago, better than Arizona State last year, but in neither year were they better than that particular team. They went 0 for 3 against the last 2 Big 12 champs in the last 2 seasons. They got to handle some business. But they're a team getting a lot of love and praise. And, Trev, when you look at BYU, very manageable schedule this year. Very manageable schedule. They don't play Texas Tech, which is obviously big, because I still think Texas Tech's a bad matchup for them, be honest with you, if they get anything at quarterback. They do have to play TCU and Utah on the road. They get Arizona and Arizona State at home. But there's no Texas Tech. There's no Houston on their schedule. And as I mentioned, they get the 2 Arizona teams at home. So very manageable schedule. No K-State on their schedule either. They do get Iowa State at home. This is a schedule that if you're the team you think you are, and if you're the team you've been the last couple of years, Texas Tech should once again, BYU should once again be squaring off in the Big 12 title game against Texas Tech, Houston, Arizona State, Arizona, like one of those top teams. So they've got a chance to make a statement in the Big 12, which then in turn gives Notre Dame an opportunity to make a statement against the Big 12. And what can the statements mean, Trev? There's two ways of looking at it. One is, we talked about it. If Notre Dame does drop a game, this gives you a chance to say, hey, we beat your best team. So let's say Texas Tech goes 12-0. BYU goes 11-1, loses to Notre Dame. BYU beats Texas Tech in the Big 12 title game. Now all of a sudden there's that jockeying for position between Notre Dame and Texas Tech where you say, hey, we have one common opponent. We beat them. You didn't. We beat them at their place. You lost them on a neutral field. That helps Notre Dame in seeding. So it's not just battling for maybe a potential at-large spot with the second team from the league, that kind of thing. But it's also about jockeying for position against those leagues. Hey, we beat both of your best teams. So that's why we should be ranked here or here. You can say whatever you want about our schedule, but we beat the ACC champ, the Big 12 champ, and oh, by the way, we beat the ACC runner-up as well. Those are things that could potentially help Notre Dame when it comes to seeding this year, and also silencing some of the narrative. If Miami's out there whooping people in the ACC, if BYU's out there whooping people in the ACC, if SMU's having a really good success, and they're going to have a chance early, they play Louisville and Florida State early on the road. Then all of a sudden it's like, okay, those are big November ranked versus ranked matchups. And I expect Notre Dame and BYU to be a ranked versus ranked matchup as well. So you're going to have at least three, and we're going to get into Navy, you're going to have at least three ranked opponents, potentially one or two top 10 to 12 teams going into November, October, November, which I think is huge for Notre Dame as well. So when we talk about statement opportunities, that's what it is. And the more convincing your win, the bigger statement you make. BYU is a statement this year against the Big 12. Trev, I would add this last point. I think the ACC statement is not only about this year, but I think it's also sending a bigger picture view of, hey, we still run this league. You know what I mean? Like, we lost our way for a minute, but we run this league.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you talk about Notre Dame's schedule, obviously there's a narrative out there that it sucks and they play nobody. And some of that's just the logo on the helmet. I was talking to two buddies last night who were talking about, but like they get BYU and SMU. At some point, I do believe that there are programs out there that cross the threshold of inevitability. It's like, look, if we're talking about BYU, a team that's gone 23-4 the last 2 years, and they have an 11-win season again this year, at what point are you, 30 whatever and 5, and people still can't be like, but they still suck because I don't recognize them as a blue blood. Same thing with SMU. So SMU has a 10-win season this year. They're 20-7 the last 2 years. At some point, you have to be willing to concede, hey, this is actually a pretty good program. A lot at stake there, and it puts it into position where those leagues, specifically the ACC and the Big 12, I do believe that they would start getting more national recognition as well of like, okay, maybe this entire conference isn't just terrible. Because right now, the ACC specifically lives and dies by the household names. If Clemson and Florida State are bad, the league is allegedly just bad. Now, I will concede, like last year, the ACC was not good. You had Miami, and it was fine after that. Like you had other teams like SMU, but they weren't in playoff contention. You had Louisville, they weren't in playoff contention. Clemson had a down year. Florida State's been bad since 2023. But the league as a whole, if teams like an SMU, if teams like Miami remain on top, if BYU continues to turn the narrative around in the Big 12, I think that would give the conferences a little bit more respect.
Yeah, like what I would say about the ACC is I don't think the ACC was bad last year, just wasn't good. Meaning like I actually think the ACC as a league was improved, and its results in the non-conference showed that. But it was results against like Kentucky, South Carolina, like teams like that. The fluky one was the Bama win, obviously, early in the year. But to your point, Trev, there was nobody outside of Miami that you looked at and were like, yo, that team is legit. It was a lot like the Big 12, but they didn't have that number 2, like BYU. It was like they had their version of Texas Tech, but they didn't have their version of BYU. They had a bunch of K-States and TCUs and, teams like that where it made for a lot of competitive games during the season. But I mean, look, dude, the team that won and played for the ACC championship game last year lost to Illinois, Tulane, and UConn. You know what I mean? It's like, It was, in the team that played them, their non-conference last year was Coastal Carolina, William and Mary, and technically they lost 2 conference games, but only one of them freaking counted because they played a game against NC State that was considered a non-conference game, which is one of the lamest things you can do to play a team in your conference and it not count as a conference game. It's super lame. But like it masked that I think there's improvement in the ACC, which we'll get into, in the next segment a little bit. But yeah, golden opportunity for Notre Dame to say, you're beneath us as a league. And then the ACC can do one of two things. Either A, you can continue to cry about having to play Notre Dame, or B, you say, hey, listen, we've got 2 standard bearers that we got to work towards, Miami and Notre Dame. We got to play them. So then we got to figure out how we got to do what we got to do to be more competitive. And if this is what frustrates me about the ACC coaches, if they would step up and be competitors instead of just joining like the chorus of whiny coaches, like that's what college football's turned into, a bunch of crybaby coaches that just woe is me, woe is us. Oh, this is tough. I can't believe this isn't fair. That's not fair. Stop crying. You guys don't like it when your players cry about that stuff, but you get to do it all the time. Look at it this way. That's the team we got to beat. And that's the team we got to beat. Miami, Notre Dame. Because in the 17-team schedule, you're going to play Notre Dame just about as much as you're going to play Miami unless you're Florida State. We gotta, that's the standard. Let's get better. Let's shoot to being like them. That's why Fran Brown, in this era of all these whiny coaches, earned, Trev, you talked about this when we previewed Syracuse, earned our respect because he wasn't like, this is unfair. He's like, look, I told my players that's kind of basically that's what the standard right there. Like, that's what we're working towards. As opposed to, crying about Notre Dame and have to play Notre Dame. It's like, look, I want to play Notre Dame because then it's like, now we know what a great program looks like and now we get to work towards it. And they can either take that mantra or they can keep crying. And hopefully the good coaches will jump in and say, hey, this is what we're working towards. You want to, you're tired of the big dog coming at you and bullying you? You know what? And start doing some push-ups and, you know what I mean? And do all those type of things and go handle your business. And next time they come back in town, you pop them in the mouth. So that's what I hope the ACC is able to do this year. Step up because Notre Dame needs the ACC to get better. They really do.
Yeah.
But to your point, Trev, it's up to a bunch of teams that Notre Dame doesn't play outside of Miami. That's why we're not going to focus a lot on about it now. We'll talk about it here in a couple minutes. But anyway, big statement opportunities for Notre Dame this year against the ACC and the Big 12 in different ways.
Brian, let's preview the ACC here on the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And really, we're splitting this up into 2 different kind of conversations. Conversation number 1 is we're just going to reveal what our rankings are. So over the weekend, Brian and I sat down and we broke down all 17 teams in the ACC. Still kind of gross to say 17 teams. Different conversation perhaps for a different day. But we sat down and we actually...
Only the ACC. You know what I mean? Like, only the ACC is dumb enough to have an odd number of teams. Like, it's so on brand for this league, but I digress.
Yeah, very par for the course. But it was funny because...
Only Jim Phillips would be a commissioner with 17 teams.
100%. That's how we set ourselves apart. But yeah, we sat down this weekend and I made this entire document and it's like super formatted and like every team's schedule, like in alphabetical order and who they play, when their bye weeks are, and it allowed us to go through and make predictions for every game. That's how we come up with these rankings, little peek behind the curtain. It's not, we kind of look at it and look at the depth chart. It's like, 8-4. We look at every game and we make predictions for every game for every Power 4 team in the conference. It's a lot of fun to dive into. But I made this whole document and I was feeling great about it. And I shared it with Brian, texted him. I was like, hey, bro, I just shared this for us. It's going to be great. And Brian was like, hey, man, I appreciate you sending me this. But I made the exact same document about 10 hours earlier. But thank
that
you
night
for
before.
sending it over. Yeah. So it was.
Yeah.
It
Great
was
minds
really
think
funny.
alike, brother. That's what that was.
That's
what that was.
Yeah, you know it, man. But I love putting these together because, one, it gives us the opportunity to dive into every single team and what's working for them. We talk all the time on the show about, sometimes everything's very matchup based. And, we look at that and who they return and who they come back and who could be breakout players, things we're going to get into in kind of the second conversation that we're having with the ACC. But then storylines kind of play a factor. You look at coaches' track record and what that looks like. That's going to play a role once we get near the top. And, what teams have the best outlook, what teams are sleepers. And so, what we're going to do in kind of this conversation is we're going to break down this ranking into different sections. First, we're going to preview teams 17 to 14, and then 13 to 10, 9 to 6. Then we're going to get into our top 5. And really, up until we get to our top 5, it's going to be more of a brief conversation. We're not just going to reveal the rankings and move on, but just quick little hitters. And then we're going to really dive into our top 5 and get into superlatives, man. This is going to be a really fun talk.
So, like, it's trying to, we love doing long shows, and we're always going to do long shows, and people that cry about us doing long shows, that's not the audience we care to attract. You guys like it, but we also understand that not everybody wants to hear a thorough analysis of all 17 teams in the ACC. So the way that we're doing it is we're going to kind of briefly mention the, kind of the 6 through 17. We'll do the same thing, the Big 12, 6 through 16. And then we'll spend more time on the top 5. If you guys want to hear our thoughts on a team that we don't dive into, then you ask us that question and we can get into it in the mailbag. That way, if it's an analysis of a team, like we may, hey, Trevor and I would love to break down Cal, but we don't think you guys care about Cal. So then somebody says, well, I'm really curious your thoughts on Cal. Ask it in the mailbag. That's kind of what the mailbag is for. So if we're going to expand on some of these teams, it'll be more because you guys want to hear more about that team, or you guys want to hear more about that player, or you guys want to hear more of your thoughts on, hey, let's say there's a Miami fan in the chat and we say, hey, we've got Miami number 1, or let's say we had Miami number 3, just a little teaser. And you say, hey, what's going on? Why do you have Miami 3 compared to the? If we don't answer it in the segment, then hey, follow up on us. Tell us why, or challenge us. Hey, what about this? And that makes for some fun conversation. But then it's you guys get to ask about some of those other teams that maybe we don't spend as much time on, instead of us spending an hour and 20 minutes going through all 17 teams. And that's what the conversation. So that's why we're going to do it the way that we're going to do it. But we will discuss and spend some time, obviously, on the top team. So that's why there's a little bit of a change this year to the way that we're kind of going through this. And then I also, I like feedback from you guys. And so people have said, hey, we'd like to see your prediction side by side. So today, you'll get a chance to do that. So without further ado, Trev, let's dive into the ACC. First and foremost, I think this is a huge year for the ACC.
Oh, yeah.
Off the field, Jim Phillips has to find a way to get his big programs on board with committing to us. Like we have no leverage. We have no negotiating power with any entity that might give us a lot of money, including TV networks, if Clemson, Florida State, Miami, Virginia are all hinting about wanting to leave the conference. We need you guys to be on board. And then get publicly, privately support us as best you can. And then if we can't get you good deals when that 2030 comes, then you have the opportunity to leave based on our negotiated settlement. Jim Phillips has a 3-year window. I'd actually say a 2-year window to save the league. Part of that comes down to they've got to get better on the field. You want to make your fans pay more attention? Put a better product on the field. It is kind of that simple. There's some great opportunities in the non-conference this year, and I expect there to be a very intense battle between Notre Dame, between the you've got the top couple teams, but there's a lot of teams, honestly, Trev, in the middle from like 4 to about 13 that you could see it going a lot of different ways. So it could be I think it's going to be a very entertaining year in the ACC. I think the ACC has improved itself in recent years. They've improved it by adding better coaches in recent seasons. Obviously, Mario Cristobal has kind of figured out how to get his alma mater going. You've added Jeff Brom to the league in recent years. Manny Diaz is doing a really nice job at Duke. Obviously that's been something that's been a positive for the league. But you go through it. Cal is putting a lot of money into the football program. They spent a lot of money on NIL last year. We'll see how that goes. So I think that the league overall is showing improvement. Rhett Lashley's been a great addition to the league. We'll see what Tavita Pritchard is. Tony Elliott's got Virginia turned around. And then, of course, adding James Franklin was big. And I think the Wake Forest coach is a really good coach. tand there's rumblings that they're trying to spend more on the program. We'll see how that goes. But I think that's something that's helped. There's more work to be done There's still some dead weight in the league from a coaching standpoint, but I think that's partly why we're seeing improvement. But at the end of the day, Jim Phillips has got to get his ADs together and say, you've got to commit more resources to getting good at football. Because over these next couple of years, we've got to make some statements in the non-conference and in the postseason if we want to have more leverage to get a better TV deal in the future. Or to maybe leverage like, hey, ESPN, we've got this deal with you, but we're going to go sign this side deal with so-and-so to carry more of our games that you're not carrying, whatever. You've got to have some leverage by putting a better product in the field. Once we get those better deals, then you could spend some more of that money on basketball. But right now, basketball's not making money like football is. And he's got to lead that. But at the end of the day, the product on the field's got to be better. And honestly, Trevor, I think this year it's going to be better. I think this is one of the better years the ACC has had in a long time from a depth of the team standpoint. Now, is there a national title contender in there? We think there is in Miami, a team that played for the title last year. Is there more than one? That's the question. And that's honestly one of the big differences between the Big Ten and the SEC compared to the Big 12 and the ACC is I love the depth of the Big 12 and the ACC. But the Big Ten's got at least 3 title contenders. The SEC has at least 3 title contenders, maybe 4. These leagues have 1, maybe. ACC has 1. Big 12 is the maybe. And that's where it's got to get better. Now, some things have happened in recent years that makes me think maybe this could happen, and we'll dive into that. But this is a big year for the ACC, Trev. It is. And I think it's going to be a fun year for the ACC. They have put bad football on the field in recent years. I think that starts to change a little bit this season with some of these teams, and we'll get into that. So I'm ready to roll, man. Are you ready to get this thing going?
Always. Let's do this.
All right. So let's start off. So Trev we'll go blocks of 4. Trev will give his 4. I'll give my 4, and then we'll just spend a couple minutes on each of those blocks. So Trev, let's get things started off with your 17 through 14 ranked teams.
Yeah, number 17 for me is not going to come as a surprise to anybody. That's the Boston College Eagles. At number 16, I have North Carolina. 15, I have Florida State. Number 14, I have Stanford.
The bottom of my ACC is number 17 Boston College, number 16 North Carolina. We see that the same. 15 Duke and 14 Syracuse. This was tough for me. North Carolina has better talent than 16. Trev and I both believe that. Our prediction comes partly because we think if that team gets off to a rough start, which they can, and we think they will, we have them losing early to TCU. We have them losing early to Clemson, and then we have them getting absolutely rocked by Notre Dame. I could see with all the other off-the-field drama, I could see things kind of going south in a hurry, kind of like they did for Florida State a couple years ago. And that's kind of why we have North Carolina as low as we do. Duke's an interesting one for me, Trev. I want to get your thoughts on the Blue Devils. So Duke did a nice job in the portal. They did some, they recovered well because they suffered a really devastating blow when Darian Mensah and Cooper Barkate left really late. I mean, had to sue to get into the portal. And it made it a lot harder to replace them with anything remotely caliber. And I think they did a nice job of recovering. They got Walker Egat from who's a quarterback at was at San Jose State last year, threw for over 3,000 yards. But I think they lost way too much, in my opinion. But the other thing that hurts Duke a little bit this year, Travis, their schedule's tough. They play at Georgia Tech, at Virginia, at NC State, at Miami, at Wake Forest, and then they have a home game against Clemson. That's what I think I think Duke is better than the 15th team in the league, but I've just got a lot of tough losses in there to really good teams. So that's why they're number 15 for me.
Yeah, their schedule's difficult. When I was going through and predicting what Duke was going to do, the word that comes to mind, if I could sum it up in one word, is inconsistency. I think that there's going to be some games where it's like, okay, that's a Manny Diaz-led Duke team, and then there's going to be others where it's like, that's why you're missing Darian Mensah and Cooper Barkate. And so that's what's so tough about predicting them. I'm with you. I went more so, I guess you could say, ceiling projection with Duke because I do like Manny Diaz as the head coach. But that's where I ended with them, and we'll talk about them on my side here in a little bit. But I agree, we share a lot of very, very similar concerns about the Blue Devils.
And I know for you, Florida State being that low is a lot like what we talked about with North Carolina.
Yeah, the bottom three teams in my list, Florida State, North Carolina, and then rounding out 17th with Boston Colleges, I worry that the teams will quit on all three of those coaches.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Norvell, Bill Belichick, and Bill O'Brien are very much on the hot seat going into this year. And it's for Bill Belichick, I don't see them necessarily quitting so much. I can see that happening with Boston College. Going 2-10 last year with the level of talent on that roster is a travesty. And I don't see the level of talent even coming close, especially on offense. And now with the injury to Kalen Chudzinski being anywhere remotely close to what it was last year. And with Florida State, that problem is systemic. And unfortunately, Mike Norvell is he's one of the primary drivers of that ship, and they're just in between a rock and a hard place with what to do with him between his buyout versus his Florida State wanting to put together the money to get him out of there. And so this is a big year for them. I went floor here. I have Florida State going 4-8 this year, and I believe I have them going 2-7 in conference. Yeah, Florida State at 4-8, 2-7 in conference, and so that's where I ended with them. And then with Stanford, it's talked about it when we previewed them, but they just lack the top level athletes to compete with some of the upper teams in the league that they'll face this year.
Yeah, you and I had Stanford and Syracuse very close. You had them Syracuse a little bit higher. My issue with Syracuse is their schedule.
Yeah,
they play at Pitt, they play at Virginia, they play at North Carolina, at NC State, at BC. Because of, again, the uneven schedule, they've got 5 road games in their league. And then they're at home against Louisville, SMU, and Clemson. That's a brutal home schedule. Brutal home schedule. So not only do they not get this is who they play all year at home. Cal, who can beat them, Louisville, who can beat them, SMU can beat them, Clemson, who can beat them, and then Notre Dame, who can beat them. That's a rough home schedule for Syracuse. So again, this is predicting how teams are going to finish. Stanford doesn't have an easy schedule. I just think it's a little bit easier than Syracuse. I think on paper, Syracuse is a better team than Stanford. I just think their schedule is brutal. Let's get into our 13 through 10.
Yep. At number 13 for me, I have Wake Forest. Number 12, I have Georgia Tech. Number 11, I have Syracuse. And then at number 10, I have the Duke Blue Devils. Good Lord.
Yeah. My 13 through 10, I have Stanford at 13. So again, Stanford and Syracuse, one spot apart. I have Georgia Tech at 12, Wake Forest at 11, Pitt at 10. Trev, Wake Forest is another one that I think is a much better team than the 11th spot in the ACC.
Yes.
The problem is their schedule is ridiculous, in my opinion. They have to play at Louisville, at NC State, at Cal, at SMU, and at Georgia Tech. And their home slate is Miami, Stanford, Virginia, and Duke. So I don't think Wake Forest is going to be much different as a team than what they were last year. But that schedule is absolutely brutal. And that's why I have Wake as low as I have Wake, and I know that you feel the same way. They are a top 10 ACC team on paper. But when you look at their schedule compared to some other teams ahead of them who have much easier schedules in their conference, that's why we have the Deacons as low as we do. And part of it's I don't trust their quarterback, Gio Lopez, but they won 9 games with Robbie Ashford at quarterback. So I think that their coach has shown he can win with bad quarterback play. But it's the schedule's brutal, man. Brutal.
I mean, and the tough part that I had with Wake Forest, I'd be curious to see if you shared the same difficulty, is typically with some teams like that, we're able to say, hey, if you can serve at home, or if you can handle business on the road. With Wake, it's like, I guess if you can handle business at home against Miami and an improved Stanford team to a degree, Virginia, but then it's like you can't say that about on the road either. I mean, you get Louisville on the road, NC State on the road, Cal, SMU, and what we know, I mean, a thing that played a factor into these rankings for me is there is yet to be a team that has shown with any level of consistency that they can have success in this expanded conference era going across the country.
Yep.
I mean, so that's another piece that factored in. With Wake, they're going down to Texas and playing SMU. They're going out to the West Coast and playing Cal. I mean, it's just so difficult.
Yep. I agree. Georgia Tech, both of us at 12. So we put our rankings together before we shared them with each other this year. Georgia Tech at 12. I actually think they are going to be a bottom half of the
Yeah.
league team this year. They do have a tough schedule, but I just think they've lost way too much. And look, last year, Georgia Tech was able to win a lot of tough, hard fought games, Trev, and won 9 games. But I mean, honestly, this is going to sound bad, but I think a lot of their success last season, Clemson was down. They should have lost to Wake Forest, honestly. Got lucky there. Virginia Tech was down. They went on the road and beat a mediocre Duke team. Syracuse was down. Boston College was bad. They didn't play Miami. They didn't play Louisville. They didn't play Virginia. They didn't play a lot of the top teams in their league. And some of those games against teams that weren't that great, they won by the hair of their skin, or chinny chin chin, right? Lost at home to Pitt by 2 touchdowns late in the year, got beat by NC State by double digits. Like, I just don't think they were that good of a team last year. With the exception of they had a quarterback that just willed them to victory. I mean, he was their Riley Leonard. It's you put just about any other quarterback in the country on that team last year, and they're not sniffing 9 wins. That's what we said about Riley Leonard in 2024. I don't know if there was many quarterbacks that you put on that team and say, "Oh boy, that they would have been even better if that guy was their quarterback." Like, he just willed them to victory, and I have no faith that Albert Mendoza is going to be the guy for Georgia Tech this year. So there are 2 teams that we have much lower than some of the predictions, and then much lower than they've been. I think and their roster was just gutted.
Yeah.
From graduation, and then guys jumping in the portal. Buster Faulkner leaving is another big one, because I think a lot of the success they had was about Buster Faulkner. Now, my one beef with him is he rode the quarterback Haynes King a little too much, but he's a really, really good offensive mind, and I think that's a tough blow. The one saving grace is they should have a decent offensive line, and Justice Haynes is a dude at running back if he can stay healthy. But overall, their roster just is not nearly as good as it's been in recent years.
Yep. If he's able to stay healthy, I love the Georgia Tech run game, but I think they take a step back at quarterback, and losing Buster Faulkner was a huge piece for me. I mean, not every offensive coordinator can walk into Athens and give a Kirby Smart defense fits. And that's exactly what he was able to do in 2024. I think that's a major loss on top of losing Haynes King. I'm with you on Georgia Tech. I'm with you there completely. My 9-6, I have NC State, Virginia Tech, Pitt, and then Cal at 6.
My 9-6 is I have Florida State at 9, NC State at 8, so we're close on them. I have Cal at 7, close on them as well, and then Virginia at 6. And I think you have Virginia at 5, so we have those 2 teams very close as well. So this 1-9, we have a lot of similarities, Trev. Pitt is one team that you have a little higher than I do. Talk to me about why you like the Panthers a little bit more. Part of it's schedule for me. Yep. Just that's kind of part of it for me is schedule. But let's talk about the Panthers and what you see from them.
Yeah, for me, I think Pitt is going to be able to benefit a little bit from their schedule in a way, because the way that it shapes out, at least when I was going through my predictions, is they lose to all the teams that they probably should lose to, and I think they're going to beat the teams that they should beat. I mean, they benefit from getting North Carolina and Boston College in back-to-back weeks. Their out-of-conference schedule is Miami, Ohio, and UCF and Bucknell, which I think is going to really help them out. And then I have
Georgia
them
Tech
losing
and
on
Florida
the road.
State at home. Yeah.
Yep. And then I have them losing to Louisville on the road, Cal on the road, Miami on the road, and Virginia Tech on the road. It's going to be a very Pat Narduzzi-esque type of season. I see it panning out to where it's like, hey, like people are going to start looking at Pitt that going into the second week of October. It's like, hey, they only have 1 loss with North Carolina and Boston College coming down the pipe. And then it gets into kind of the meat of their schedule. They get Miami on the road, Florida State at home, Georgia Tech at home, Louisville on the road, Cal on the road. And so I think it's going to be very Pat Narduzzi-esque. And that gets them, based on what I believe their conference record to be, at 7. In no world would it shock me if they are outside of the top 10 here. That's, I mean, because there are losable games within their schedule that I talked about. I mean, I chalked up Georgia Tech as a win, but if they're able to run the ball the way that we think that they could, and by that time Alberto Mendoza, and he's going to be settled into that offense, that could easily be a loss.
Yeah.
So I just went with, I guess you could say, like the safer, they're going to beat the teams that on paper they should beat, and they're just going to lose to the teams that they should most likely lose to. And that's
I
where I
think the
landed
one
with
difference you and I have is I have them losing to Virginia Tech.
Mm.
And I think that it went in because there's things are so close, like one game flipping, and I'll talk about this in the Big 12 as well, but one game flipping is going to result in us being 5-6 spots apart from a team.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's a lot of closeness there with the conference schedule. So when I look at Pitt, Trev, I see a team I see a quality football team. I see a normal Pitt team. The only issue is I don't love their skill talent as much as I kind of have liked it in the past. I think they got a nice running back. They have solid receivers. It's not as good as they've been. Their offensive line should be okay. Their D-line, they're still going to be really good on defense, even despite losing the 2 linebackers. But it's schedule related. I think their road schedule is really tough, and that's going to drag them down a little bit. Because like there's a lot of this, Trev, is this is the nature of the unbalanced schedule. There's some teams that have 5 road games in the league and some teams that have 4 road games in the league. When you play a 9-game conference schedule, the reality is that's going to play a huge role. And some of the teams that I have ranked higher are teams that have 4 conference road games. Pitt has 5. And that factors into it a little bit in what separates it. I'll tell you what, there's 2 teams right here. I have 7 and 8, and you have 6 and 9 that you and I are very intrigued by, who could be potential noisemakers in that they are not in this grouping, they're in the next grouping, and that's NC State and Cal. With NC State, it's the same story as always. They've got a talented roster. There is no doubt about that. They've got arguably the most physically talented quarterback in the league. Not the best quarterback, physically gifted. 6'6", big arm, athletic, and C.J. Bailey, guy that we've been high on for a while, and a guy that drew rave reviews for his just cannon for an arm at the Manning Academy. Duke Scott was a playmaker last year. They get Keenan Jackson and Ashton Locklear back. They got a kid, Trev, in the portal that I'm really curious to see how he does. A kid named Victor Snow from Buffalo. They got JoJo Trader out of Miami, who is looking to resurrect his career a little bit. Offensive line, they had to rebuild the left side a little bit through the portal. But it comes down to did their remade because like almost every team in this league had to remake their defense through the portal. It was wild, and they're another one. But I don't trust Dave Doran to maximize the roster. But so I have them 8. Talent wise, they should be better. They should. But we just don't have a lot of faith in Dave Doran. That's why we both have them a little bit lower. I think they're a top 5 to 6 team talent-wise. But until Dave Doran can show that he can maximize this roster, and especially going on the road and maximizing their roster. But again, partly why I have NC State a little bit higher than Pitt is because NC State has 4 road games. They play Virginia, Stanford, Florida State, and North Carolina. Very manageable road schedule, especially with Florida State and North Carolina at the end of the year. If those 2 teams do one we think is going to quit, if Florida State and North Carolina do what you think they're going to do, and to a degree what I think they may do, I believe North Carolina will, Florida State, they could be walking into a situation at the end of the year with two of their 4 road games against teams that have quit. And that could really shoot them up. So NC State has a schedule. No Miami on their schedule, no SMU on their schedule. There is no reason that NC State shouldn't be better than 8th or 9th based on their talent and their schedule. But Dave Doran just finds ways to minimize. So that is one team that I could see vaulting way up. And then Cal, they might have the 2nd or 3rd best offense in the league this year in competition with SMU. I mean, they bring back their quarterback. They went out to the portal, had a lot of success. With a receiver, they've got a very intriguing offensive coordinator. If their offensive line can do anything, that team could be very dangerous this year, Trev. Very dangerous. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what Cal can do. But again, their defense is rebuilt through the portal like everybody else's defense is built through the portal. And I have no clue how good Tosh is as a coach. That's the other thing that gives me a little bit of pulse. But that offense is going to be fun to watch.
I'm very, very high on Cal. I'm with you completely. They're knocking on the door of my top 5. A lot of that, I put a lot of faith in Jaron Sagapolatele, their quarterback that's coming back. I like getting Ian Strong out of the portal. I like the Adam Muhammad pickup. I mean, their entire running back room is essentially made up out of the portal. If their offensive line could just hold its water, they don't have to be Joe Moore Award finalists. Now, they are on the Joe Moore Award watch list.
Yeah.
So
That
keep
was
an
the
eye out.
dumbest thing I've ever seen. Trev texted me today. The Joe Moore Award put out their preseason watch list, and you know what? I kind of respect this.
Yeah.
They literally put every Division One team on there, and you know what? It's silly, but I respect it because they're basically saying, why aren't we watching everyone and letting how teams perform determine who we're going to have be our semifinalists or whatever else? And you know what? I kind of respect that because a lot of these kids don't start on the radar of a team, and it's like, hey, like why aren't we talking about this team? Well, or this guy. Well, because nobody was talking about him, and so he has to go above and beyond to put on this list. So I respected it, but yeah, it is kind of funny. Every team in college football has a Joe Moore Award watch list offensive line this year. It was great.
Yeah,
I loved
man.
it.
It was definitely funny to see. But in all seriousness, I'm very intrigued by Cal. They're a sleeper team for me coming out of the ACC that could definitely make some noise if their offensive line is able to hold serve. Right now, FanDuel has their over/under win total set at 6.5. I'd be very inclined to take the over if that's something that intrigues people. But Cal is a team that I'm looking out for. And then with NC State, I have them when I went through their schedule prediction. It was the most NC State schedule of all time. I have them upsetting Louisville and losing to Florida State on the road at the end of the year because that's just
Yes.
that has Dave Dorn written all over it, man. I
Or,
mean,
or
that's where
or
it
they're
is.
like 7-2 going into those last two games, and like, hey, if they can just beat a bad North Carolina and Florida State team, they could play for the ACC championship, and then like lose them both. You know what I mean? It's just it's just Dave Dorn. If he can finally do the job, then that team could surprise some people. Let's jump in our top five, Trev, and we'll wrap it up here with our top five.
Yep. At number 5 for me, I have the Virginia Cavaliers. At number 4, I have the Clemson Tigers. Number 3, I have the SMU Mustangs. Number 2, I have the Louisville Cardinals. And at number 1, I have the Miami Hurricanes.
My top five, Trev, is I have Virginia Tech at 5, Louisville at 4, Clemson at 3, SMU at 2, and Miami at 1. So we do have the same top 4. Let's talk about the Hokies a little bit, Trev, because you had them a little bit lower on your list, and I understand. 3-9 team last year, but you and I watched them a lot last year, and it was one of those teams where I just felt like they shouldn't be this bad.
Yeah,
there's no business for them to be this bad. James Franklin can recruit, and he can go out and get teams motivated. And I love bringing back the former head coach who got fired as D coordinator because that's the job he should have had to begin with. But I look at Virginia Tech, and this is a lot more talented team than the 3-9 they were. And their best players from last year, for the most part, are back. I do like Ethan Grunkmeyer at quarterback. We'll see if he can kind of rebound from the rough start. I think they're loaded at running back. They got a portal kid, Marcellus Hawkins, and they got Messiah Mickens signed with them, who I think has a chance to play as a freshman. Getting Kayshawn Brown of the portal is one of the most underrated portal pickups of the offseason. ACC had a ton of teams picking up really good receivers out of the portal. He was the number 2 receiver last year at Duke behind Cooper Barcade. Had 63 catches for 842 yards and 5 touchdowns in the league. So he knows what he could do. I like their portal pickups of the offensive line, and I think with their defensive coordinator, former head coach, now their defensive coordinator, Brent Pry, I think their defense is going to get back to being a little bit of a salty, fly to the football, improved defense, and they've got depth up front. So the final piece for Virginia Tech is I think their schedule sets up relatively well. They play Clemson and SMU and Miami, but they get them all on the road, which is actually perfect because they're going to lose to those 3 teams anyway. So at least you get them on the road. You know what I mean? But their home slate sets up nicely. They got Pitt, Georgia Tech, Stanford, and Virginia all at home, which sets up pretty nicely. Then they do have a couple of road games, and if they can just win one of them, I think they got a chance to finish with a winning record in the league, which vaults them into this status, and that's at Pitt and at Cal. So as long as they can just avoid a bad upset, I like this football team. I really do. I think James Franklin's going to get them turned around a lot quicker. And just so we're clear, for me, there's a big gap between my top 4 and everybody else in the league. So, like, it's not, they're just behind Louisville. Like, there's a pretty big gap between my top 4 and everybody else.
Yeah, I so badly wanted to move Virginia Tech up because we've talked about it all offseason. I love the hire. I like that they rehired Brent Pry to come back as defensive coordinator. I like what they returned from their unit last year. That gives you a foundation of some sort of culture. And I like how they supplemented the roster with James Franklin bringing over a lot of kids from Penn State. The biggest thing for me that I still have to see from them is James Franklin. You know all the nicknames out there, Big Game James and all that stuff. There are big games on their schedule this year.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's going to take the day? Is it the fact that now he is the underrated coach taking over a 3-9 team and he could sneak up on some people? Or is it going to be we see the James Franklin that we saw at Penn State when they were on the road against Ohio State, on the road against Michigan, at home against whoever, right? And so if he's able to prove that to me, they vault into my top 5 at 5th. But until I see that, that's where I'm at with them. But absolutely have the potential to do it. Virginia Tech is going to have the opportunity to move up this list.
Here's my counter to that. They will lose every big game they play. They're all on the road. They're going to lose all of them. I think it's if the teams that he doesn't lose many games where he has the superior roster. And I think there's actually going to be a lot of games where they have the superior roster this year.
Yeah.
And I think they're sometimes like not playing the top teams is obviously an advantage, but another one is when you get the top teams all on the road. Because if let's say hypothetically that Virginia Tech had Clemson at home, SMU at home, Miami at home, but they had to play at Pitt, at Georgia Tech, and at Virginia. Same teams, flip who's home. I think their record is worse than it is. Because I think they lose most of those games at home, if not all of them. Maybe they sneak like one upset. But then they lose some of those other games on the road that they would otherwise, I think, win at home. Now, all of a sudden, they're 9th on my list. So it really did work out well for him. But I also agree that there's a lot he's got to prove at Virginia Tech. At Penn State, they almost always had the better roster, except when they played Ohio State and Michigan. That's why in Oregon in recent years. So I just think that roster is a lot more talented than maybe some people think. Let's talk about Trev, the Clemson Tigers, because that's a team that you and I are both predicting to have a bounce back year this year.
Yeah, I'm not willing to write the obituary yet for Clemson. The 7-6 season that they had last year was the anomaly, but I think it's because they're not in national title contention like they were from you could argue back to 2013, really 2015, but debatable going back to 2013 that they were through 2020, 2022, and that's why I think the perception of Clemson is people like, yeah, they just suck now. It's like, well, they don't suck now. The 7-6 season was an anomaly. But I like a lot of the pieces that they come back. Now, I will say this. I'm always hesitant, and this isn't my rule for Clemson. This is my rule about teams in general. I always hesitate when it's addition by subtraction, when that is a conversation. That always makes me nervous. But with Clemson, I do think that is going to take the day here. I don't think that's going to be the case for Alabama, something that we'll talk about in tomorrow's show. That hasn't been the case for Florida State because we've been saying about that with them for the last couple of years of like, hey, they're getting rid of some of the head cases. This could be the year it turns back around. For Clemson, I do believe that to be the case, though. Dabo Swinney is one of the better coaches in the business. Tom Allen, their defensive coordinator, is going into year 2. And then when I look at their schedule, I think it sets up relatively favorably. I do have them picking up a big win early in the regular season. That's out of conference, but I'll talk more about that later. But then I have them going on a little bit of a win streak from October 17th until the end of the year. Now, I have them actually having a very favorable record in the ACC, and I think I have them losing to Miami. I have them losing to Cal on the road because, again, it's just going from South Carolina, literally coast to coast. You were quite literally going from the East Coast of the country to the West Coast of the country, and I think that's going to play a factor. But I think Clemson is due for a rebound this year. I have them at 4th. I'm high on them, man. I'm with you.
You have them losing at Cal, right?
Yes, sir.
I have them losing at Cal as well, which is why I think they beat Miami the next week.
Oh.
Backs against the wall. Miami kind of overlooking Clemson because, they just lost to Cal, blah, 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 and Clemson sneaks up on them. Look, I like this team. It's all going to come down to their quarterback for me. Their running back room is going to be so much better than it was last year. Gideon Davidson is back after being a true freshman last year. He's a talented runner. They got Chris Johnson Jr. out of the portal. If he can stay healthy, he's a big play back. I think that helps them there. Their receiving core is going to be nasty. Bryant Westco's healthy. TJ Moore's healthy. Tyler Brown's a really good player. They got a great freshman class. coming in. They got Juju Preston out, as well as a kid that's kind of emerging. There's some issues going on with Cole Turner, but that's a deep receiving core. They got two really good tight ends in Olsen, Pat Henry, Christian Betancourt. The big thing for me that gives me optimism about them is I think that their offensive line is going to be improved this year. There was just something off with their offensive line last year. And they got a left tackle. Keep an eye out on this kid, Braden Jacobs, 6'7", 345. Got some playing time last year as a freshman. And I think he's got a chance to be a really good player. You got Harris Sewell back. You've got Colin Sadler back. He'll have a starting job. I think this is going to be a scrappy unit. But I think the big thing for me is I think their defense is going to be much improved. That's the side of the ball where they had you watch just the way Khalil Barnes interacts with Dabo Swinney on the sideline. You're like, getting that kid out of your program is a good thing. You look at Peter Woods, was not the same player, not the same person he was the year before. And it was a bunch of attitudes and not a lot of guys that were down for being part of the team. And Dabo doesn't know how to function that way. Go out and look at the guys they got out of the portal. They went out and got guys that I think are going to be more bought into that. You go get Marcus Strong out of Oklahoma. You've got a rising sophomore, Amari Adams, that I think has a chance to have a breakout season. London Merritt, you got him from Colorado as a depth player. Darren Mayo's an up-and-coming young player that I think is kind of in the verge of like a Bryce Young type of jump. Jaheim Lawson and Will Help might be the best 1-2 punch at end in the league. It's them and Miami, I think, in the conversation for that battle. They're deep at linebacker, and their secondary, for all the talk about how Dabo doesn't go to the portal, they could have at least 5 to 6 starting defensive players that are portal pickups over the last 2 years. They went to the portal hard this year to redo their secondary. And I think they got some tough, hard-nosed kids, from smaller schools. They got the kid from Memphis, who I think is going to be a really nice player. Corey Myrick, I think, was a really nice pickup out of the portal from Southern Miss, Jerome Carter from Old Dominion, I think is a really nice portal pickup. Plus, they went out and got, Elliott Washington from Penn State, who's played a lot of big-time football. So I think Clemson has a bit of a bounce-back season. And I also think Clemson's schedule sets up well. They do play Miami, but there's no SMU in conference schedule. Because look, they could get slaughtered by LSU and South Carolina and still be a 1 or 2 loss team in their league. But there's no SMU, there's no Louisville. You look at this schedule, like you look at our top 5. They play Miami, no SMU, no Louisville, and they get Virginia Tech at home. Then you look at your other list, Trev, the one that you had. There's no Cal, or they have Cal on the road. We have that as lost. There's no Pitt. They have Virginia Tech at home, and there's no NC State. So, like, a lot of the top teams that in the league, they don't play. And I think that in the best team they play, they get it home. So I think their schedule sets up very favorably for them to have a bounce-back season. Now, they lost to some teams they shouldn't last year, but again, we explained why we think that is a little bit different this year. Let's talk a little bit about, Trev, about Virginia. I'll let you have them in your top 5. We have them one spot apart. Let's talk about why you have the Cavaliers in the top 5.
Yeah, for me, it starts up front in the trenches on offense. I love the potential of what their offensive line was. They were a good team last year, played for the ACC title, scrappy team, and I believe they returned 4 of the 5 starting offensive linemen that were a part of that unit. Right now, they're going through.
And they get back a kid that was supposed to start for them at tackle last year, but got injured. Yeah.
Yep. So I love the outlook of what they have in the trenches. And then offensively, as far as quarterback is concerned, I haven't seen anything that says whether Bo Pribula or Eli Holstein has won the job. But I think with that offensive line, to varying degrees, they're going to have moderate levels of success. The whole thing is going to come down to how they're able to manage it. I think Virginia, especially last year with Chandler Morris, proved that they're an offense that kind of lives and dies by how the quarterback performs. And I think the quarterback competition there is going to go a little bit, dictated a little bit, but I also like their schedule. I mean, they get NC State, but they get them at home. And like we've established, NC State is not good away from their home stadium. They're out of conference. They get Norfolk State, West Virginia, but at a neutral site in Delaware. And then in conference, it's a very manageable schedule, especially at home.
They get Michael Vick. Vick.
They do.
Michael Vick is going to be coming to Charlottesville, because he's the head football coach at Norfolk State. Sorry, I just had to get that in.
No, you're good. You're good. I completely forgot about that. But they're
I mean, they're not
home.
going to win. I'm just saying, like, it'll be because he was there as a player, but
Still
yeah.
cool to talk about. But I go through and I look at what their home schedule is in conference. You get NC State at home. You get Syracuse at home. You get Duke at home. You get Cal and North Carolina at home. I would be shocked if Virginia doesn't run the table at home. It's how much success can you have on the road? You get SMU on the road, Florida State on the road, Wake on the road, and then you get Virginia Tech on the road at the end of the year. I like Virginia. If their quarterback is able to be shored up, I like what Tony Elliott's done with the Cavs. So I have them in my top 5. But I am with you. There is still a gap from 1 to 4, and then the rest of the list.
Agree. Let's talk about the Louisville Cardinals, because this is the biggest wild card on this list. We are assuming that Jeff Brom does Jeff Brom things and gets this team going. And when I look at what they did in the portal, I don't know that anybody in the ACC had a better offensive portal class than Louisville, outside of maybe Miami. But I think you could even count Louisville, because Miami didn't need to go. It's not so much they didn't have the need for portal offensive linemen. Louisville did. So, but they went out and got it, and they had a very, and you and I have been talking about this for a while, very, very underrated portal class. Lincoln Kienholz, I think, is going to be a perfect fit for that system. It might take, here's the concern I have about Louisville, Trev. I worry about them having such a tough start to the season with the new quarterback. You got Ole Miss in week 1, and then 2 weeks later you get SMU at home. If you're not able to win that game, you do have some tough contests. You have at NC State, at Syracuse, at Georgia Tech, at North Carolina, where maybe you're scrambled. But honestly, outside of that SMU game and at NC State early, like, you could get off to a rough start. But the rest of their conference schedule is Florida State at home, at Syracuse, home against Stanford, at Georgia Tech, at North Carolina, home against Pitt. That is a very manageable schedule. And if you can somehow pull off that upset over SMU, you got a great shot to make a run at the ACC championship game. But their rosters, I mean, it's a talented roster. You got Isaac Brown is one of the best running backs in the country coming back. Kewan Brown stayed. They got Marquise Davis out of the portal. Great depth there. Trey Richardson was a huge pickup out of the portal at Vanderbilt. Huge pickup. LaWayne McCoy was a big play guy at Florida State last year. They got Trayshawn Hurry out of the portal last year from San Jose State. Didn't do a whole lot last year, but I think he's going to have a bit of a breakout. And they got a really good tight end, Brody Foley, out of the portal as well, who played at Tulsa. Notre Dame actually had initially scheduled a visit for him to come to South Bend because the GM and the staff liked him a lot. And so did the coaching staff at Notre Dame. The problem is they liked him, but they didn't want to bring in a portal guy at tight end. They wanted to go with what they had, plus you've got Ian Premer coming in. So I think, but they liked him, and he's going to go to Louisville, and they love throwing to the tight end. Defensively, they have a very good linebacking core, one of the best in the SEC or ACC. They had 2 huge pickups out of the portal, and Caleb Beasley and Cohen Etchinger from Iowa, Caleb Beasley from Tennessee. The key for them, Trev, they got Clev Leuven back, stud defensive end. 2 keys. Did their portal pickups on the offensive line and defensive line, were they hits? That's the difference between Louisville being, 4th to 2nd or being 7th to 10th. I went with a little bit of an in-between. You took the ceiling. I went with a little bit of an in-between. But you and I both agree that if the portal pickups and the lines were hits, this team has a great shot to play for the ACC championship. Great shot. And it's going to come down to what they do in week 3 against SMU at home. I'm anticipating them not being quite there yet, and that's why I have them 4th. If I'm wrong and they're ready to go by week 3, they not only win that game, I think they go on a run, and they're playing Miami in the ACC championship. That's what I think about Louisville. But with Jeff Brom, can he avoid that? What the heck was that loss this season?
I factored that into putting Louisville at number 2, and this is why I love doing shows like this, because it's a lot of projection. You also have to lean into storylines. But here's where I ended with the Louisville SMU matchup because I'm with you entirely. What takes today? Is it Louisville's remade offensive line in the portal or SMU's remade defensive line in the portal? Because SMU's remade defensive line is also going to be trying to find their footing. And so I gave the advantage to Isaac Brown. He is kind of the difference maker in that matchup for me.
Oh, yeah.
I actually have Louisville beating SMU early in the season. They're just such a fascinating team to break down because I have more concerns about them. For example, I have more concerns about Louisville on the road against Syracuse than I do at home against SMU. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how I view them. But here's how I see their season panning out. I have Louisville going 8-1 in the ACC, losing to NC State on the road in the middle of the year because NC State's just a completely different football team when they're at home.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how I see Louisville's season setting up. I think Jeff Brom, over the course of October, post NC State loss on the road, all the way up until rivalry weekend, is going to kind of silence some of those critics on, like, are they going to avoid the what the heck was that game? When you get Stanford at home and Georgia Tech on the road and Syracuse on the road, I have them winning all those games, Pitt at home. I have Louisville going into rivalry weekend, and all they have to do is secure a win on the road against Kentucky. And then it's like, hey, win or lose in the ACC championship game, you have a strong case to be an at-large bid in the college football playoff. And I have them losing in the last week of the regular season against Kentucky. You have a team full of portal players potentially overlooking the Wildcats with a new head coach and Kenny Minchie and a bunch of portal players down there in Lexington. It's a rivalry game that's going to be huge for Will Stein, which is going to put Louisville in a spot where they have to win in the ACC championship game now to make the college football playoffs, because I don't believe the committee is going to put in Louisville at 9-4. So the head scratching, what the heck was that loss, I think is going to come at the end of the year if they lose focus. But everything that you said about Louisville, I'm with. They have the ability to be a top 3, top 4 team consistently in the ACC this season. But if some of those line pieces don't work out, I could see them falling outside of the top 7. And it's going to be very interesting to see what they do this year. But they have the talent, and Jeff Brom has the talent at his disposal to have an exceptional season.
Top two teams for me, Miami, SMU. We don't need to spend a lot of time on them, Trev. We broke them down a lot this offseason. I just think these are the two best top to bottom rosters in college football that also, or I mean, in the ACC that also have experience. And that's the big difference between SMU and Louisville for me, Trev, is SMU has so much coming back that's known. Louisville doesn't, outside of the front 7. You've got some studs coming back, not a lot, but the guys that do come back in the front 7, your 2 linebackers and Clev Lubin are really, really good.
Yeah.
But I just think SMU outside of their D-line has just a lot more knowns coming back. But to your point, that week 3 game between those two is going to have a big say on whether SMU is that team or whether Louisville's that team. And there's no question Miami's the class of the ACC. Yes, they lost a lot from last year. They have a lot coming back. They had a great portal class. Will they be, the head and shoulders above everybody else? To a degree. I think the question is how much better. But that question is more about growth that SMU, Louisville, Clemson, teams like that make. It's not so much about Miami coming down as much as those teams ascending. But I think Miami is still the class of the ACC. And I think Miami's schedule is also sets up well for them to remain that way. Also, I think they're going to be that way no matter what. But you got to play at Clemson. But they don't play SMU, they don't play Louisville. So if you look at our top opponents, they play Clemson, they get Virginia Tech at home. They don't play Virginia, they don't play SMU, they don't play Louisville. That helps as well. Helps a ton. And their road games are Wake Forest, Stanford, North Carolina, and Clemson. I have them losing to Clemson in conference. That's their only in-conference loss.
Yeah.
And that's an upset. I could easily see Miami running the table in the ACC this year. But they also have to prove to me that they can show up every week. Just like Notre Dame has to prove that. You know what I mean? Like, they have to show that they can show up every week and avoid that bad loss. At least last year with Notre Dame, their 2 bad losses were to 2 top 10 teams. They didn't lose to SMU and Louisville. But guess what? Miami doesn't play those teams this year. Well, the year before, they got beat by Syracuse and Georgia Tech. Well, they don't play Georgia Tech and Syracuse either. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's just in a 17-team league, that's just kind of where we're at. So, Trev, ACC championship. I've got Miami against SMU, and I have Miami winning the ACC. You have Miami, Louisville in the ACC championship. I'm going to tell you right now, if Louisville is in the ACC championship, they will have a much better shot to beat Miami than SMU will. I just don't have Louisville getting there because of how their season starts and it being a rebuilt roster. But again, if you're right about that week 3 game, I do think Louisville could be in there. So I love that prediction of that game and then how that influences the rest of the year. If Louisville's in the ACC title game, I think they have a much better shot of beating Miami than SMU does. What say you in that matchup, Trev?
Yeah, from a matchup standpoint, I love how Louisville can match, especially in the trenches. We can have a conversation about Louisville's secondary versus the Miami receiving core, but the best way to ensure that Darian Mensah doesn't get the ball to Malachi Toney and Cooper Barkate and Vandrevius Jacobs and Joshua Moore is if he's running for his life because Clev Lubin is having himself a day.
Yeah.
Having said that, I do think Miami still wins the ACC title over Louisville because I think there's going to be somewhat of a mismatch on Louisville's offensive line and Miami's defensive line, barring good bills of health for both teams. And I have Miami ultimately shutting the door on Louisville's playoff hopes because, like I said, I have them dropping that game to Kentucky, and I don't see the committee putting in a 9-4 Louisville team into the playoffs despite playing for the ACC title. So that's how I have their season panning out.
If Louisville goes into the Kentucky game with a shot at the playoffs, I don't see them losing that game. That's not the kind of game they lose. They lose the game where you're looking past that team to get to that team. That'll be fascinating stuff. You have the Hurricanes winning the ACC. I have the Hurricanes winning the ACC. So, Trev, that's kind of where we're at with our predictions for the ACC.
Let's get into some of the superlatives for the ACC here in the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And Brian, this is one that I don't know how it was for you. For me, I can speak on this. A lot of my superlatives were fed by how I see my prediction for the rankings going down. You know what I'm saying? Like Louisville has a heavy influence on some of those for me. SMU, obviously Miami. So it was a lot of that. But I also, and it sounds like you did the same, didn't have any repeat players.
Yeah, and I didn't give you that directive because I wanted you to have the freedom. If you wanted to have somebody for the same 3 things, then you could. I did not, so there's no repeats for me. So let's start off, Trev, in the ACC with the top offensive player. This is just the most effective, impactful, dominant player. It's not the most statistically dominant. It's just the best player, the most impactful player. It's sort of an MVP, but I don't love the word MVP because that can mean so many things. But let's start off with our top offensive player in the ACC. And we're going to go through these kind of rapid fire, Trev. Top offensive player for you, Trevor Trowbridge.
Isaac Brown, the running back from Louisville. I think the best way to ease in a quarterback, a new, young, inexperienced quarterback, is by a stout run game. Some of that's going to be dictated by the offensive line, but I've been a huge fan of Isaac Brown since he got to Louisville in 2024. So he is my offensive player of the year in the ACC.
I'm going Kevin Jennings, quarterback from SMU. I just think Kevin is going to build on what he did last year. He's going to put up big numbers, and I have SMU getting all the way to the conference championship game. And I think Kevin Jennings is going to need to carry SMU more than some of the other players in the league are going to need to carry their teams. You could talk about Darian Mensah and Malachi Toney and all that, but like those teams, it's kind of like they're going to split between each other. Where if SMU is going to play for the ACC championship, Kevin Jennings is going to have to kind of put that team on his shoulders a little bit, and that's what rises him to the top of my top offensive player standings. Let's go to top defensive player. Same thing. It's sort of a most outstanding / valuable, impactful player in the ACC. I know this one we have in common, Trev. Who is your top defensive player in the ACC?
Will Helt, defensive end at Clemson. I mean, if they're going to be a top 3 team like Brian has or a top 4 team like I have, regardless, we mentioned that there's a big gap between 4 and 5. So we think highly of Clemson. If they're going to be the defense in year 2 under Tom Allen that we believe that they can be, Will Helt's going to have a heck of a season. So I have him being a clear-cut difference maker in this one.
That's my pick as well. It came down to 3 defensive linemen. I have all 3 of them earning some award, so I'll stick to that. But my top player is Will Helt on the defensive side. Let's talk breakout player, Trev. This can be a guy that goes from not being a starter to an impact player, a backup, rotation guy to an impact, a starter that goes from being a good player to a big-time player, or a guy that has a breakout from a national perspective. So we'll get into that here on my defensive one at least. But let's talk about our breakout player in the ACC on offense.
Yeah, on offense, I have Jalen Cooper, young wide receiver from SMU. I'm very high on him this year. I like Ymir Knight. I like the Yannick Smith pickup. But the thing that I believe is truly going to set their offense over the top is an emergence from Jalen Cooper. I feel very much about Ymir Knight the same way I feel about Jordan Faison in Notre Dame's offense. Like, hey, if he's just what he was from last year, I think they have a heck of an offense. The thing that takes it over the top is an emergence from Jalen Cooper. So he's my breakout player for this year in the ACC.
Mine is Lincoln Kienholz. You're talking about a guy that's going to go from not having ever started a game to a 3,000-plus yard passer. He's going to get, close to 30 touchdown passes, and he can run. I wouldn't exactly call him necessarily a dual-threat quarterback, but he can run and make plays. I think he is, without a doubt, my breakout player this year. I love the Jalen Cooper pick. I think there's other really good candidates, but I'm going with Lincoln Kienholz. Let's talk defensive breakout player in the ACC this year, Trev. Who you got?
I'm sticking with the Mustangs. I'm going with the linebacker Brandon Booker with them. I think that there could be some very underrated linebacker play this year in the ACC. Not a lot of people are talking about him. People are focused on, I included, focused on the losses up front for SMU. I think if their defense under Mo Crum Jr. is going to be what they need it to be, I have Brandon Booker playing a big role in their defense being solidified. So he's my breakout guy for them.
Mine's Ahmed Moten from Miami. Look, and I know he's got a reputation in the scouting community. He was only a second team All ACC only a second team All ACC player last year. I think Ahmed Moten's going to make a jump in two regards. Number one is he was overshadowed a lot last year by Akeem Messidor and Reuben Bank. Now he was still very good. 9 tackles for loss last season. 4.5 sacks. I think his numbers jump. I think he becomes a double-digit tackle for loss guy. He was one of the other players that was in the conversation for me for top defensive player in the ACC. So I think his breakout isn't so much that he was okay last year and becomes a dude. He was a dude last year. I think he becomes even more of a dude. He now becomes the leader of that Miami defensive line, and he becomes a bigger national name. That's why I have Ahmed Moten as my breakout player. It's more of that national breakout that he gets now known as one of the top D linemen in the country, top D tackles in the country, and is even more of a household name than he is now. Where again, the scouting community loves Ahmed Moten. The normies of college football don't know as much about him, which is okay. I think by the end of this year they will, and that's why he's my breakout player. Let's talk top newcomer. Now this can mean one of two things. It can be a true freshman or a transfer that came from outside the conference. In-conference transfers do not count because they may be new to that team, but they're definitely not new to the conference. So, freshman or transfer from outside the conference. Who you got, Trevor?
This is where I have Lincoln Kienholz coming over from Ohio State. The last Ohio State quarterback that went to the ACC had a field day in Kyle McCord in 2020. What would that have been?
2024,
now,
yeah.
Kyle McCord had more.
2024.
Kyle McCord had more experience in what Lincoln Kienholz brings to the table, but I'm confident in saying I think Lincoln is going to a better developer of quarterbacks than what Syracuse had. Not to knock them, but I'm really high. And if Louisville is going to be the team that I project them to be, the number 2 overall team in the ACC, Lincoln Kienholz is going to have that type of season for them.
You got the team right, Trev. You just got the player wrong. But your breakout, your newcomer is going to be a big reason why my newcomer is going to be the top newcomer, and that's Trey Richardson. Obviously, I love your pick, but I already have Lincoln Kienholz as a breakout player. I'm kidding there. Trey Richardson is going to have a monster year at Louisville. Number one, it's a very pro wide receiver offense. I mean, very pro wide receiver offense. On top of that, this is a kid that had 46 catches for 806 yards in the SEC last year and had a monster finish to the season. In his last 4 games, he caught 21 passes in his last 4 games and had 6 touchdowns in his last 4 games. Had 124 yards against Auburn, 159 against Kentucky, 6 for 75 and a touchdown in a win over Tennessee, and he torched Iowa in the bowl game. 6 catches for 127 yards and a touchdown. Him and Lincoln Kienholz are going to be great, great friends this year, Trevor.
Yeah.
And the way I see it, I was joking about you got the player wrong. The breakout from Lincoln Kienholz is going to play a role in Trey Richardson being the newcomer, and Trey Richardson being a dominant player is partly why Lincoln Kienholz is going to be my top breakout player. This is going to be a great combination, a great duo. It's going to be for Louisville, kind of like what Connor Wegman and Amari Thomas was at Houston last year.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to have a big year. Big year.
Love it.
Let's talk defense, Trev. Who's your top newcomer in the ACC?
Yeah, it's Damon Wilson that came over from Missouri going to Miami. Look, Miami's the favorite on FanDuel to win the ACC, and their defense is going to have to play a big role in that. There's some things that he has to show me from a run-stopping standpoint, but he is a certified pass catcher or a certified pass rusher. So I have Damon Wilson as that top edge for me.
Same. We've talked a lot about Damon Wilson this offseason. I don't think he's the all-around player the two kids they had last year are, but he's a really good pass rusher, and I think he's the top newcomer in the league. I for a second I was like, I like Omar Thornton pickup, and I was like, nope, he's not eligible. He came from Boston College, so he's not eligible. Let's talk top skill player, Trev. This could be any running back, wide receiver, or tight end in the ACC. It can be a newcomer, it can be a returner. Who is your top skill player in the ACC?
This is when Malachi Toney enters the conversation, because when I'm evaluating the league and I'm looking at top wide receivers, running backs, especially as far as wide receiver is concerned, he is to a degree in a league of his own. Now, there's great wide receivers, and I expect there to be great wide receivers
on his own team.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
100%. But Malachi Toney, I think, is that dude, and I think he builds off of his tremendous true freshman season.
What you just said is partly why I'm excited to see the ACC this year. This league is loaded with good receivers. Yes. Loaded with good receivers, and I can't wait to watch them play. Malachi Toney's my pick too. Very obvious choice. The reason he's not my offensive player is because I do think there's more high-level receivers in that lineup than there was last year that's going to take some of those touches away from him. I could see maybe higher yards per catch, but not as many catches. And then teams are just going to start focusing more of their game plans on stopping him and making someone else beat him. That's why maybe his numbers aren't quite best overall player. And his numbers might not even say top skill player, but when you break down the film and you're like, yeah, he only had 5 catches for 60 yards because they were double teaming him all game, and that actually was a really impressive performance. And the reason Cooper Barkate went 7 for $120 is because he was getting solo coverage all day because they were doubling on Malachi Toney. That kind of impact. So I agree with you.
That's what it came down to for me in that one as well.
Let's talk top skill player on defense.
I'm actually sticking with the Hurricanes on this one, and I'm going with Bryce Fitzgerald. I popped in his film, and I really liked what I saw from him. When you read the stats and people are like, hey, 6 interceptions last year, it's like, okay, well, was it like 6 interceptions? Like he was just, were they errant throws? Was he in the right place at the right time? Was he doing his job? What did that look like? And I really liked what I saw from him as a freshman. I think he builds on it as a sophomore. So that guy for me is Bryce Fitzgerald from Miami.
Yep. So Trev, I'm going to go with, I got a Miami DB. I have a tie on this one. I have Ashton Hampton, the cornerback from Clemson, who I think has a major breakout season, and I'm going with O.J. Frederick. I think Bryce Fitzgerald's a very good player. You know what's funny is of all the stuff that Miami fans have thrown at us this year when we're breaking down the team, you know what's funny? Not one of them has ever mentioned that every time we talk about, I still can't believe Breontae Johnson didn't play against Miami. They should be like, Bryce Fitzgerald didn't play much against Notre Dame either. And she didn't. Him and Breontae had about the same amount of snaps. So, Bryce Fitzgerald's in there, conversation for me, but I really think O.J. Frederick has a bit of a breakout season this year. He's my tie. I think him and Ashton Hampton are going to be arguably the two best corners in the league.
Yeah.
Let's talk Coach of the Year, Trev. We're going to wrap it up. Which coach does the best job this year in the ACC?
Based on how I see this year playing out, I have Jeff Brom winning the ACC Coach of the Year. Putting it all together, you go 8-1 in conference. You play for the ACC title. I have Jeff Brom winning that one.
If you're correct about Louisville's record and them finishing second in the league, you will have a good pick there. If I'm correct and Virginia Tech has the season that I think they're going to have, and Brom doesn't do what you think he's going to do, I got Virginia Tech's James Franklin. They're going to go from 3-9, in my opinion, to being a 7-8 win team. Just quite a turnaround in one offseason. So I'm going James Franklin. And you know me, I am no James Franklin apologist, but I think he's going to get that team turned around very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. There were a couple of superlatives in there that I didn't know if you still wanted to touch on. Top linemen on either side of the ball, top quarterback.
Yes, I passed right over those, didn't I, Trev? Let's talk top quarterback. I think we're going to be similar here.
Yeah, Darian Mensah with Miami. Spent a lot of time talking about the Hurricanes. They were both of our number one team. I really like what Darian Mensah brings to the table. That, and there are some other quarterbacks throughout the league. I don't want to just make it sound like Darian Mensah's winning it by process of elimination, but I have the least amount of questions about him than I do about Lincoln Kienholz, and I do about Bo Prabula, Eli Holstein, that I do about Kevin Jennings to a degree. So that's also what played into it as well.
The only thing that separates him and Kevin Jennings from being the top all-around player is two things. One, Kevin Jennings is going to use his legs more this year, in my opinion. And two, Darian Mensah will always have a little bit of the shine taken off because of who he's throwing to, more so than Kevin Jennings. Darian Mensah is my pick for top quarterback in the league as well. Top lineman on the offensive side of the ball, Trevor. It's simple. It's an offensive lineman. Who's your top pick?
PJ Williams from SMU. I think he's going to be one of the better offensive tackles in the league. A lot of the attention goes to what Miami has or what Louisville got out of the portal. SMU is going to have one of the better offensive lines in the year. I don't have SMU playing in the ACC title game. I have them third. You know what I mean? And a way to do that is to have a stout offensive line and keep Kevin Jennings' jersey clean. I think PJ Williams is going to play a big part in that.
I agree. PJ's my pick. You know I'm very high on him. I had him as a first-team all-opponent player for Notre Dame this year. Let's talk top linemen in defense. We'll wrap it up with this one, Trev. Top linemen, defensive linemen. We've talked a lot about some guys already. Who's your pick?
Clev Lubin at Louisville. Again, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Keep this quick. If Louisville has a season that I believe that they're going to have, they're going to need a presence on the edge. That's why I have Clev Lubin in this one.
He's the third of what I said earlier. I had three defensive linemen in contention for the top defensive player. I went with Will Helt. Ahmed Moten was in that conversation. I gave him the breakout pick. Clev Lubin is a guy that I have as my top lineman. You could easily flip Moten here. I could see Lubin having that national breakout season, and then you put Ahmed Moten here. It's pick one. I think those three guys are all very close for top defensive player overall. Very good year. Very good year. There's the kid from North Carolina. Very good year in the ACC for defensive linemen. Another reason that I think the league has a bit of a bounce back this season. I go with Clev Lubin as well. If y'all don't know who Clev Lubin is, check out the film. He's really good. Really good.
Brian, let's dive into the Big 12 here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. This is a very interesting conversation, very interesting conference to break down. It's not as Wild Westy as it was last year, but this is still a pretty wide open conference, especially in the depth. But we're going to do the same thing that we did with the ACC with the Big 12, and we're breaking it into segments. You know, we're talking about teams 16-13, 12-9, 8-6, spend a little bit more time in our top five. But this is a very, very competitive conference. A lot of moving pieces. You're getting new portal players in at almost every school that are going to play a huge role in some way. A lot of quarterback drama, a lot of star player drama coming out of the Big 12 when you factor in what happened with, Parker Kingston at BYU and Brendan Sorsby at Texas Tech. You get new faces at Arizona State. Kyle Whittingham is now gone from Utah. So this is a very, very interesting conference to break down.
Agree. It's a big year for the Big 12, Trev. They got very mouthy last year as a league, especially the guy at the top. Got real mouthy, and then you go into the postseason and you get smacked by Oregon. So it was Texas Tech a one-hit wonder, something you and I talked about, right? Like, they were great last year, but everybody thought Arizona State was on the verge of becoming that team last year, and it ended up being Texas Tech. Now Texas Tech has to show that, hey, we're that team, because what the Big 12 desperately needs, is they need someone, hopefully a few someones, to step up and say, we're the standard bearer of the league. We're the team that everybody else has to shoot for. The problem with the SEC is forever it was Oklahoma. I mean, they dominated the league for almost 2 decades. And now it's like, since they left, it's like, okay, who is that team? 1 year Arizona State's good, the next year they're not. 1 year Texas Tech is just okay, the next year they're dominant. The most consistent team in the league has been BYU the last 2 years. But Texas Tech got real mouthy last year. They talk a lot of trash. They went through the whole twisted off season. And the unfortunate thing about the whole Texas Tech mess with Brendan Sorsby and their just choice to, we're going to sacrifice everything we believe in, something our money man and our AD and president went out and basically fought to get the betting rules changed, and we were against the betting rules and all that. But yet, when it comes to benefiting us We'll sacrifice what we believe in, to win. That's all that was. It overshadowed what was a very fascinating offseason in the Big 12 overall. I mean, you look at two teams. I think there was two teams in the league that brought in like 80 players. Oklahoma State and West Virginia just completely have brand new rosters. I mean, Kenny Dillingham and his emergence, the job that Arizona did last year to bounce back, Kalani Sitake, and the fact that Penn State tried hard to get them into their league. You talk about the great job Willie Fritz has done. The new coach coming into Iowa State, who's was an FCS national champion. You got an alum, former great player in the conference, Colin Klein, coming back to coach Kansas State. Great offensive mind, Eric Moore's coming in. Big year for TCU. All the drama at Utah. There's a lot of great storylines, and it was all overshadowed by the selfishness of Texas Tech. So you got to go out there and make a statement with what you guys do on the field this year, and I'm hoping they do, but it's a big year. Right now, I'd say they're slightly ahead of the ACC perception-wise. That could change this year if you don't see them bounce back. And there's some matchups in between those two leagues that are going to be very fascinating as well. So I'm ready to jump into this, Trev, but before we kind of dive into this, I should probably get into this as well. But I will say this about the Big 12. If they want to be taken seriously as a league, they're going to have to win it, not only in some of these big matchups we talk about, but more importantly, when they get to the postseason, they have to be more competitive. What's interesting is the way that Texas Tech performed last year overshadowed the fact that Arizona State gave Texas everything they can handle in 2024. And that totally got overshadowed by the fact that Texas Tech got embarrassed last year. Part of the reason everybody jumped on to pile on to Texas Tech is because of how mouthy their coach got last year and just kind of all the trash that they talked as a league. So there's an opportunity there, Trev, for the Big 12 to make a statement, but they're going to have more success out of conference this year in some of those matchups, and they're going to have to make some noise in the postseason. I think no matter what we see during the season, it's going to be a fun league. It's going to be an entertaining league. It's going to be a league that still has a lot of offense. It's a league that's got a ton of new players, and a league that I think went out and made a couple splashes with coaching hires and got some fresh blood. Colin Klein, Eric Morris, getting Jimmy Rogers into the league. That's Jimmy Rogers. That's the guy's name, right? The guy that went to Iowa State, right?
Yes.
He was at South Dakota State a couple years ago. So, I think they did a really nice job of going out and bringing in some fresh blood into the league, but now they got to back it up with the product they put on the field. So it's a big year for the Big 12, in my opinion, as a league. So we're going to see how it all shakes out. I'm just making sure I got all these cards in here. I'm ready to go, Trev. Let's get into our predictions. I'm going to bring this card up as you start to release your, here we go. Come on now. As you release your group, I will pull it up.
You got it. Yeah. Previewing and getting kicked off here with the Big 12 at number 16, because they actually have an even number of teams. I have the Colorado Buffaloes. At number 15, I have Cincinnati. 14, I have UCF. And at number 13, I have Iowa State.
My 16 through 13, Trev, I have Cincinnati at number 16, UCF at number 15, Colorado at 14, and Baylor at number 13. I don't think Colorado's going to be that good, Trev. I just think they're going to be a little bit better than you. I think they have some really intriguing portal pickups. The big thing for me is their offense was so terribly coached the last 2 years. Like, terribly coached by Pat Shurmur. Sneaky off. You talk about fresh blood into the conference. Bringing Brennan Marion in to be the offensive coordinator. Bringing that, what do they call that offense? What's the name of his offense? Let me look it up real quick. I forget the name of it. It was a big go-go offense. And he went to Sac State last year. He was at UNLV, and they put up all those numbers. They actually have really good skill talent. What it's going to come down to for Colorado is line play. Their offensive line has been so bad. I think part of that was just how poorly they were coached. I actually think they're going to be a little bit more improved, but I also think Cincinnati's going to be really bad. And I think UCF has a really brutal schedule. So that's why I have Colorado a little bit higher, but we have the same three bottom teams. I don't think a lot separates those teams. And part of it comes down to, for me, is when I look at the schedules, I have one game being decided late in the year, that's going to determine why I have the teams where I have them, and that's UCF goes to Colorado. The winner of that game is going to get out of the cellar. That's why I have. So that's my bottom four.
Yeah, not much disagreement. I think Cincinnati takes a big step back. UCF schedule's brutal. I don't know if there's a more show me team in all of college football in my eyes than Colorado. Colorado and how they were talking was Texas Tech before Texas Tech was Texas Tech. You know, they were the new and hot name on the block. They're bringing in Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders and Shiloh Sanders, and they're having rappers on the sidelines at games. They're having Lil Wayne lead them out of the tunnel, and they're doing all this stuff. And the 2024 season with Shedeur is the anomaly so far in Deion Sanders' time. I'm never going to question the skilled talent he's able to bring in. I have massive questions about their offensive line play, because the next time they put a good offensive line on the field is the first time they put a good offensive line on the field. If they're able to answer those questions, then I could see them being higher than 16th, obviously.
Sure.
But I think UCF, Cincinnati, and Colorado are the clear-cut bottom three teams in this league.
Yep. Let's get into the next group, Trev.
Yeah, 12 through 9, I have Kansas at 12, TCU at 11, Baylor at 10, West Virginia at 9.
Interesting. This is where it starts to get really fascinating for me after the bottom kind of 4 or 5. Here we go. There we go. We both have Kansas at 12. I have Utah at 11. I have the Utes making a big drop. I have Iowa State at 10, West Virginia at 9. Iowa State at 10 is number one. They have a great coach. They brought in a really, really good coach. They had a nice portal season, and their schedule is very favorable. When you look at Iowa State's schedule, they got to play BYU at BYU. They've got to play Arizona at Arizona, and those are games they're going to lose no matter where they play. They get Utah at home, West Virginia at home, Oklahoma State at home, Cincinnati at home, and Kansas State at home, and their other road games are at Baylor and at UCF, teams that I think are going to be also really bad. So that factors into where I have Iowa State. I don't think we see them much different. I just think the schedule is unique. Kansas is an interesting team, Trev, because they could be good this year, like better. They are what we talked about in the ACC, like Wake Forest. There's just some teams in the league that I think they're better than their record, but their schedule is not nice. They have to play Arizona State in London. They got to play at Utah, at Kansas State, at TCU, at West Virginia, at Oklahoma, and then they get BYU at home. It's more about their schedule is going to make them be a little bit worse than I think they will be. They're actually, their roster, you could say, is as good as any of the in this group, if not better. But that schedule is what hurts them for me.
Yeah, it's so up in the air because you bring in Andy Kondelnicki and their offense might have a chance to have a big turnaround. But then, even FanDuel has questions.
Dylan Edwards out of the portal.
Yeah. Their over under win total on FanDuel is 5.5. That's literally smack dab in the middle of all right, do you think they're going to be over or under 500? And right. I think that's what's intriguing about this team because it's just so up in the air right now with them.
Right, and that's with Long Island and Middle Tennessee in their non-conference. You know what I mean? So that's basically saying, do you think they're going to win 3 or 4 games in their league? You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I'm at there. The interesting team is West Virginia. Look, we got them 9 because they are literally a brand new team. They completely remade their team. It all comes down to me, Michael Hawkins. Michael Hawkins is the key. Rich Rod is going to go as far as this quarterback can take him. And if Michael Hawkins fits that offense, they're going to be good because I'll tell you right now, they might have the second best backfield in the league after Texas Tech. They're in the conversation because they obviously got Cam Cook out of Jacksonville State, who had a monster year last year at Jack State. He is a guy that Rich Rod obviously coached at Jack State. And then they also got one of my top 5 backs in the nation last year in Amari Latimer, who's going to be a true freshman, who's having a monster camp. I ranked him as one of the top 5 running backs in all of high school football last year in the 2026 class. He picked West Virginia. He was originally committed to Wisconsin. They are going to run the ball this year. It's, do they have a quarterback that can scare teams and just complete some passes? They were so bad at quarterback the last couple years that, last year, excuse me, that it just killed everything for them. It really did. And even still, they lost by 7 points to Ohio. They lost by 6 points to TCU. They lost by 2 points to Arizona State. There were several games they were in last year. And then in some of the games where they got beat late, they were in it for a while. And then the other team just kind of pulled away. BYU is an example of that. So they upset Houston at Houston. I think that just kind of shows their potential. They beat Pitt last year. Like, if they can get anything from Michael Hawkins at quarterback, that team's going to be dangerous and could sneak up on some people. Baylor, we both have 10 or lower. I have them 13. You have them 10. I think DJ Lagway helps if he can stay healthy, but I just think overall that's just not a great roster, and I just think Dave Aranda's kind of done. I think sure. I don't know that he makes it past this year.
Yep,
in my opinion.
I agree completely.
Utah's the interesting one, Trev. Here's why I have Utah low. Number one, they lost a great coach. They lost a lot of their staff, and they lost the vast majority of the players outside of David Dampier that made them good last year. I look at that Utah team, and they're not a team that can sustain losing 2 first-round draft picks at offensive tackle and still be rolling. I just don't. I don't see it. I think they beat up on a down league last year. They started to, show some warts on defense second half of the year last year. I think their defense is going to be really bad. That's the reason I have them down. And I think their schedule is also really tough for the Big 12. If you look at this year, they've got to play at Iowa State, at Colorado, at Cincinnati, but then at Arizona, at TCU. They get BYU at home. They get Houston at home, Kansas at home, West Virginia at home late in the year. I think their schedule's pretty tough, and I'm just not a Morgan Scally believer. I think losing Kyle Whittingham is going to hurt that team a lot more than people think. That's just my 2 cents. And I want to give you a chance to follow up on that when you get to yours. Some of you got to understand, this is not a ranking of how we think the teams are I think they're the number one team. We're actually looking at their schedules, predicting their record, and that's why some teams are going to be lower than teams they may have more talent because their schedule is less favorable. So just keep that in mind in some of your responses. Let's go to 8 through 6, Trev.
Yeah, 8 to 6. I have Oklahoma State at 8, Kansas State at 7, and Arizona at 6.
I have the same 3 teams, just in a different order. Kansas State at 8, Oklahoma State at 7, Arizona at 6. So we have one team that's the same. The other 2 teams are flipped, and they both have new coaches, Trev. 2 coaches that people are thinking are going to bring some really fun, high-octane offense. And I'll say for the future of the Big 12, maybe not this year because we have them 7 and 8. For the future of the Big 12, these coaches being home runs is going to be important to the Big 12 rising as a conference. They need Oklahoma State and Kansas State to get back to being what they were in the 2000s when these in the late 90s when these teams were really cooking, especially in the 2000s for Oklahoma, the Mike Gundy era, Kansas State in the Bill Snyder era. If they can get these 2 teams back to being what they were, that's a huge, huge boost for the Big 12.
The Oklahoma State and Kansas State, I'm confident in saying they will not be in my 8 through 6 next year when we preview this conference. They are either going to be in the top 5 or outside of my top 8. Because I think this season is going to show it's like, okay, can Oklahoma State bring a massive roster made up of a lot of G5 guys now that I'm high on, Drew Mestemaker, Caleb Hawkins, and then same thing with Kansas State, is going out and hiring an alum as a first-time head coach. Is that going to prove to be beneficial, and does that vault them up because he understands what it takes to win at Kansas State? Or is that going to drop them down going into 2027 with room to grow? I think that's going to be fascinating with those 2 teams. And then you and I are both high on Arizona. I like Noah Fafita coming back at quarterback, and they have a very, very underrated defense that not a lot of people are talking about.
The key for them, Trev, I'm telling you, they could finish higher than this if their secondary can be okay. That part of the reason they were so good on defense last year is they had a really good secondary. I think 3 of their 5 guys are gone.
Yeah.
So that's a bit of a knock on them. And look, they had new coaches last year. They're both back. Here's what benefits them more: the fact that those 2 coaches are back and they know the system better, or that the rest of the league now knows the system better and they can be better prepared to handle it. Sometimes it goes that way. So I really like both of these rosters at K-State and Oklahoma State for the future. My issue with Oklahoma State is, again, they're completely remaking that roster, and they've got a head coach who has a fun system, but he had one good year at North Texas. One. And Colin Klein's never been a head coach. And as we've seen with guys like Marcus Freeman, even if you have a chance to be an elite coach, you're going to stub your toe a little bit in that first year, and he's remaking the team quite a bit. I love the K-State backfield. It's the defense that's a bit of a concern for me in year one. If they can shore that up, then I think K-State could be a big riser here. And Oklahoma State, it's just that there's the unknown of I don't know what their team is going to look like. Yeah, they got a bunch of kids from North Texas, but North Texas didn't exactly look good against the better teams in the schedule last year. And, I mean, can they stop anybody? That's going to be a question I have. Completely rebuilt roster. It's hard for me to really buy into that other than just the hype of Eric Morris and the job he did in North Texas last year when I'm like, yeah, but you got to look for beyond just that 1 year. He doesn't have a long track record of being great, especially in year one. If you look at the coaching job he's done in past years, Trev, he's actually needed time to really get things going. He didn't win, at Incarnate Word until his fourth year, and he didn't win at Texas Tech until his third year. He's been a college football coach for 7 years, and he's had 3 winning seasons. So I just got to see a little bit more before I'm ready for him to take a team that was terrible last year with a brand new roster, and all of a sudden they're going to be a playoff team, which I've seen some people make. Could that happen? Of course. But I'm just not quite as sold on that. Just not quite as sold on that just yet.
Same. That's why I have them at 8, because there's just a ways that we have to. I mean, even last year at North Texas, where he had a very good season, the 2 worst performances that they had were against the 2 best teams that they played.
Right.
And so that right. In UCF
now, again,
USF,
that's North Texas, right? I mean, like that's the other comment. He did that at North Texas, which means a little bit more than doing it at Tulane or Memphis or teams that have a little bit more of a track record of having seasons like that. You know what I mean? He did it at Texas, North Texas, which again, I give you, but it was just 1 year where you say, well, he's going to, look what Cignetti, I've seen, well, Eric Morris is going to do at Oklahoma State what Kurt Cignetti did at Indiana. And I'm like, based on what though? Kurt Cignetti won everywhere he's been quickly. It didn't take Kurt Cignetti 3-4 years to get teams going. He did it like right away. Is Eric Morris going to be able to be that guy? That I don't know. That I don't know. So I need to see that. Could they? Sure. Trev, in this league, teams from our bottom 3 could shock us and jump up in the top 5. That's the crazy thing about it. But right now, there's just too much they got to show. Let's get into our top 5, Trev. Our top 5 teams in the Big 12.
Top 5, I have Utah, Houston at number 4, Arizona State at 3, BYU at 2, Texas Tech at number 1.
Trev, we have 4 of the same 5. We just have, you and I have very different views of our number 5 teams. I have my number 5 team high, you have your team high, and then you have my number 5 team very low. I have your number 5 team very low in the same spot, I believe, 5 and 11, correct? If I remember correctly, you have TCU at 11, yep. I have Utah at 11, and then you have Utah 5, I have TCU 5, which is going to be fast. I can't wait to talk about it. Arizona State at 4, Houston at 3, BYU at 2, and Texas Tech at 1. I think there's a very clear, okay, we know who the 2 best teams are. It's the same 2 best teams from last year. I'm not saying that it'll end up being that way, but I just think right now on paper and just they've proven it. Let's talk about the 3 behind them first, and let's first talk about Utah. Tell me what you like about the Utes. I said why I'm down on them. I want to know why you're high on them.
Yeah, I think Utah brings back one of the better playmaking quarterbacks in the conference, in Devin Dampierre. I mean, look, here's the thing. The thing that bothers me sometimes when I talk to people about Utah is they talk about, well, what is he going to do in the NFL? It's like, I don't care what he's going to do in the NFL because I'm previewing Utah, not if the Cleveland Browns take him or not. And based on their recent track record, they're probably going to draft 3 more quarterbacks during the next 2 NFL drafts. But when I look at Devin Dampierre, he had a heck of a season last year for them. He was an absolute playmaker. He took care of the football well. He completed close to 64% of his passes, passed for close to 2,500 yards, 24 touchdowns, only 5 picks. He also rushed for 835 yards and 10 touchdowns. He's going to be the heart and soul of this team, which is going to play into some of my superlatives later. But another big piece for me with Utah is I think their schedule sets up relatively favorably. I look at, they play BYU, they get them at home. They play Kansas, they get them at home. Their away schedule is somewhat manageable. They get Colorado on the road, who I'm not high on. They get Iowa State on the road, who I am not high on. Cincinnati on the road, I am not high on them. TCU on the road factors in. I'm not high on TCU either. A big game for them is going to be Arizona on the road, but I think their schedule sets up somewhat favorably and gives them the opportunity because we share the same concerns. This is a projection for me and putting a lot of faith into Devin Dampierre, but that's how I feel with Utah. Schedule played a factor of that and when they play and who they play on the road and things like that. So that's how I ended up with the Utes at 5.
Let's talk about TCU, Trev, and I'll tell you why I'm high on TCU this year. I do have some questions about the quarterback. I still and will always get very nervous about those guys making the jump from the FCS level to the Power Four. I just, that concerns me. It really does. But there's some things I like about it. Number one, I actually think that that TCU is going to be better coached offensively. I've said this before, Trev. I'm not the biggest Kendall Briles fan in the world. You know that. I think he's a nice offensive coach, but I think he gets a lot off of how good his dad was, and he's not his dad. They went out and got the guy from UConn to be their offensive coordinator, and I think that's going to be a great hire. Have you actually looked? I know this is a rhetorical question because I know you have. Like, have any of you guys? I know you have, Travis. Have any of you guys looked at what UConn's numbers were last year offensively in a 9-win season? They averaged 35 points a game at UConn last year, and that includes some good performances. Scoring 38 on Boston. They looked a lot better against Boston College than Notre Dame did. They scored 37 points against Duke. Their passing line last year, their quarterbacks had 30 touchdowns. But on 453 attempts, they had one pick. One. That's it. One interception all year. And I think that guy is really good. He's an offensive line coach. His name's Gordon Samus. I think I just think they're going to be coached up really good. They did some really interesting things at UConn last year. They threw the ball for last year, and they made a jump. He made a jump last year in his second year at UConn. They went from like 2,600 yards the year before passing to almost 3,700 yards passing. So 2,579, 6.5 for attempt in his first year to 3,697 and 8.2 yards per attempt in his second year with the same quarterback. So it's not like they went out and got some portal guy with the same running backs. Cam Edwards had a breakout year last year. We've talked about him before. I believe he transferred to Michigan State. Correct. We believe that's where he went. But I really love the job that he did. I think they're a really well-coached team. But they're not just a, throw it all over the yard team either. They had a 1,200-yard rusher last year also. So I just think they're going to be coached well. I think Jaden Craig's got some talent. But I just like the talent on that team. I think they've got some good receivers that nobody talks about. Their offensive line should be solid. And they have, ironically, they have one of the most experienced defenses coming back in the league as far as like guys that actually played on the team that they're going to be playing on this year. I think TCU returning a lot for Big 12 standards is one of the reasons I like them this year. And I think their schedule also sets up well. They get some of the better teams this year at home, and I think they're capable of beating some of those teams at home, to be honest with you. I think they're capable of beating BYU at home. I think they're capable. Then they got Utah, Kansas State, Kansas, West Virginia, BYU at home. And their road games in the league, Trev, this is another reason. They got 2 really tough road games at the end of the year in November at Arizona, at Texas Tech. But their first 2 road games are at UCF and Baylor. I think those games are going to decide if I'm right or you're right. Because if they can't go on the road and win those games, 2 games in this league, Trev, can drop you from 5 to 11. I mean, that's how close a lot of this is, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's how I have it panned out. I mean, in the league, I have TCU. I mean, a difference of 2 games. That's actually exactly how it pans out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my concern. I got really hung up on the quarterback situation. I don't even know the last time I could tell you an Ivy League quarterback coming into the P4 and having a good enough year to put their team in a position to be top 5. I'm with you, though. Like, I like the coaching hires. That was one of the reasons why I struggled having them as low as I did. I'm not in love with their schedule, They put a lot on Josh Hoover last year. I think the new offensive coordinator is going to help that out tremendously and not put Jaden Craig in a position where he has to put on the Superman cape to win a game by 4 points. But when I looked at their schedule combined with relying on a quarterback from the Ivy League and an offensive coordinator from UConn, I was like, that's a lot of moving pieces, albeit I do like what the offensive coordinator at UConn did. That's why I was low on them. If I'm wrong, I'm going to be wrong in the direction that they should have been higher, not lower. But that's what I got really hung up on with Utah. This is a league that is very much decided by the play of the quarterback. I think we saw that last year with Arizona State and the step back that Sam Leavitt took. I think we saw that with the emergence of Bear Bachmeier and BYU. I think we saw that with Baron Morton. And even if there's less pressure on him that the UConn offensive coordinator is able to bring over, I just don't know how much I trust Jaden Craig to be a primary driver of success. That's what I got really held up on.
I get that. Let's talk about Arizona State, because they're a team that's also – there's a lot of range for where the Sun Devils could be this year, Trev. They are another brand-new team. We just, at least with them, they have a coach who has shown he can win with a brand-new team. He did that 2 years ago. Can they do that this year? Part of it too is he has a track record of taking, transfers that maybe didn't play a whole lot the year before that have some talent and turning them into big time players. He did that with Sam Leavitt. Can he do that with Cutter Boley? We love their receiver portal pickups. They had some really nice pickups on defense, Trev. But at the end of the day, you look at it and it's a lot of, I think they have 2 returning starters. So what's different between them and Oklahoma State? What's different? Well, one coach has shown that he can rebuild in the league that way, and the other has not.
Right.
In this league. That's the difference. And so that's a challenge for me. And some of the portal guys they got have shown it at the Power 4 level. You know what I mean? Maybe Drew Mestamaker's a great player, but let's see him do it at the Power 4 level. Maybe Wyatt Young and Hawkins, the running back, can be great players at the Power 4 level. We don't know that. They were very productive at the G5 level, but remember when Mekhi Hughes was a dominant player at the G5 level at Tulane and then goes to Oregon and he can't sniff the field?
Yep.
We don't know that, but I know that Omarion Miller can make plays in the Big 12 because in 11 games at Colorado last year had 45 catches for 808 yards and 8 touchdowns. I know he can do that. I watched Reed Harris beat Leonard Moore for a touchdown last year at Boston College and had averaged 17.3 yards per catch. So when I look at these players that Arizona State got, a lot of them are guys that we know who they are. It's just, can they bring it all together? Well, their coach has proven he can do that. Can he do it again? That remains to be seen. But with the other coaches we're talking about, we don't know if they can do that. We don't know if Colin Klein can take a brand new roster. We don't know if Eric Morris can do a brand new roster. That's what it comes down to for me. It's just the certainty of Kenny Dillingham compared to some others. But honestly, Trev, the top 3 teams in the league for me are the only ones I have any certainty of. After that, there's so much variation for me. But Arizona State's a team that I think has a chance to be very good this year, but they're also a team that it's a projection because it's a brand new roster. I do think their schedule works out somewhat favorably in that their 3 toughest games are on the road at Texas Tech, at BYU, at Arizona State. The rest of their schedule is very manageable. Kansas and London, Baylor at home, Kansas State at home, Colorado at home, Oklahoma State at home, and UCF on the road. That's a big reason, too, why I have them. You can look at it and say, they got 3 tough opponents. Yeah, but the rest of it, even if they go 0-3 against those opponents, there's a good chance they're 6-3 in the league. And that's what it came down to for me.
Yeah, I mean, with Arizona State, Kenny Dillingham is one of my favorite coaches at the P4 level. And so maybe there was a little bit of me that was going through and looking at this projection, maybe with my Kenny Dillingham glasses on. But I love the potential and the ceiling of this team, and that's what I'm projecting to. They might have the toughest road slate in one of the toughest road slates in college football, not just even in the Big 12. I mean, their out-of-conference road game is at College Station. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're playing Texas A&M on the road. They're also playing Texas Tech on the road and BYU on the road and Arizona on the road. Mm-hmm. And even their road game in Central Florida, you're going partially across the country.
That's that cross-country thing you're talking about, Trev. Yeah.
I mean, that's just, Arizona State has one of the toughest road slates in the entire country, not just in the Big 12, but I love the talent that they bring to the table. Biggest key to success for them is going to be what is their line play like? Because I have a lot of confidence in their skilled talent. Uh, I believe Kenny Dillingham, but I agree with everything that you said, that he has a proven track record of getting the most out of every team that he's had. Um, I think their receiving core this year is more complete. I know they lost Jordan Tyson, but Jordan Tyson didn't have one of Amarian Miller or a Reed Harris alongside of him, and I think that's
Yeah,
going to
and he
play
was
a huge
banged up.
role.
What did he play? 8 games last year?
Yep.
So that hurt him as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
Cutter Boley's the key, Trev. That and the
Yeah.
offensive line coming together. That's absolutely their key. Absolutely their key. We had Arizona State and Houston both 3-4. We just had them flipped. Let's talk about the Cougars, because that's a sleeper team for you and I both. We've talked about that this offseason. A sleeper team for a potential Big 12 championship. Let's talk about the Cougars, Trev.
Yeah, man. I mean, not a lot of people talk about the coaching changes and like Eric Morris coming into the league and what can Kenny Dillingham do. Not a lot of people are talking about what Willie Fritz did last year and that turnaround with Houston. I mean, they went from 4-8 to a 9-4 football team in one season. And they bring back a lot of the core pieces. And Connor Wegman, Amari Thomas, that was one of the better quarterback wide receiver 1-2 punches or duos in the Big 12 last year. I think Amari Thomas has something like 900 receiving yards, 12 receiving touchdowns. And then this year I go and I look at their schedule, and I think it sets up relatively favorably. Early on, we're going to know about Houston. They get Texas Tech on the road in week 3. But after that, it's a very favorable schedule. They don't get BYU. They don't have to play Arizona State. They're out of conferences against Southern, Georgia Southern, and Oregon State. And then in conference at home, you get UCF, who we're not high on. You get Oklahoma State. We'll see what you get out of that. You get Cincinnati at home, Colorado on the road, West Virginia on the road, and Baylor at home to finish up the season. And then in between all that, you get Utah on the road, which will be a very telling game for them as well in my eyes. So Houston has the schedule, and I think that they have the continuity on both sides of the ball and a good head coach in Willie Fritz to put together a really, really good season.
Agree. Look, I love this Houston team. I really do. Willie Fritz is a heck of a football coach, Trev. He's won everywhere he's gone. I think the job he did last year was excellent to get that team to win. And they won with a lot of grit. You know, I mean, just winning by 3 at UCF, winning by a touchdown at Baylor, winning by 8 at Arizona State, winning by 3 at Arizona, winning by 3 at Oregon State. There's a lot of close games, they had last year. But they also have a lot coming back. They've got arguably the best known proven quarterback receiver tandem in the league with Connor Wegman and Amari Thomas. You look at their offensive line, they've got, I think 3 starters coming back. They're one of the few teams that has multiple starters coming back on the offensive line. Like everybody else, they definitely started to go to the portal there. Kobe Young's a nice young receiver. They got Mekhi Hughes, who went to Oregon last year and struggled. He was good under Willie Fritz at Tulane. Or at least, played under Willie Fritz at Tulane. His big year, I don't think, came under Willie Fritz, because Coach Fritz that was his first year at Houston, I believe. No, he was actually really good with him at Tulane as well, I believe. Actually, I'm gonna go look. No, it wasn't. His big year came the year after Coach Fritz left, but he was, I'm in. Actually, no, it was. He had a 2023. He was. I was thinking the Tajay Spear years was his last year, but it was actually Mekhi Hughes' first good year. He was with Willie Fritz. Amari Thomas is a big-time player. You and I talked about it this offseason. They have one of the underrated receiving cores in the country. Not just bringing back Amari Thomas. Kobe Young's a nice young player. But getting Trent Walker out of the portal from Oregon State was huge. The big key is going to be how well are their portal pickups. I love their portal class because I think Coach Fritz is looking for a type. He has a little bit of that Marcus Freeman in him. We're like, yeah, you got to be a good player, but we got to get the right kind of guys. And we got to make sure that we're getting guys that are going to buy into what we're trying to do here. And to get that many players to kind of come together and play as a team was really impressive to me last year. So I really like what Houston has done. I think that they've got a shot, in my opinion, Trevor, to get into the Big 12 title game. The only reason that I don't have them there is I think their schedule. They play at Texas Tech, at Kansas State, at Utah, at Colorado, at West Virginia. So they got one of those 4 and 5 deals, 4 home games, 5 road games. Their home slates, they should run the table, their home slate, UCF, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, and Baylor. But when it came down to, Houston, Arizona State, and BYU, I would argue Houston has arguably the toughest schedule. Arizona State's 2, and BYU is number 1. They have the easiest schedule. So not only do we like BYU, I think their schedule's way more manageable, in my opinion, than Arizona State and Houston. That's one of the things that separated those teams for me.
Sure. I get that completely. I know the top 2 teams is pretty, I don't want to say obvious, but it's kind of obvious. We spent a lot of time talking about BYU at 2, and then you and I are still firm believers that Texas Tech is the class still of the Big 12. I think that those 2 teams are kind of, in the ACC, we talked about how there's, a clear gap, 1 through 4 kind of all playing in the same game, relatively speaking. Miami's in kind of a league of their own, but then it was a big drop off. I think it's 1, 2, then a drop off between like 3 and 4, and then another drop off past 4. I think that's something that's interesting too about the Big 12, but we have Texas Tech. We both have Texas Tech and BYU 1, 2 in this league.
I agree. Trev, let's talk about the Big 12 title game. We obviously have the same 2 teams in. If we are wrong on those 2, let me ask you this first. Who are 2 teams that you think have the best shot to jump in if we're wrong about it? Is it your 3 and 4, or is there somebody kind of from further back that could maybe surprise us a little bit?
3 and 4 are definitely the leaders in that conversation, but if there's somebody that I'm looking at outside of the top 5 that could jump in, I'd keep an eye on Arizona if their secondary is able to be shored up. And then another team that I am keeping my eye on is Kansas State. It's a very intriguing team with Avery Johnson coming back. I believe their running back comes back as well. We talk about
Joe Johnson.
We talk about sleeper backfields in the Big 12. If they're able to get the most out of Avery Johnson, and why I love the Colin Klein hire is Avery Johnson plays very similar to how Colin Klein played that same position at the same school just 14 years ago. So Kansas State and Arizona are 2 teams that I keep an eye on to jump into this conversation outside of my top 5.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I like those teams. I'm also going to throw West Virginia into the mix as a dark horse. Kind of where did they come from? Texas Tech type of rebound. So yeah, they're my they're my sleeper. We both have Texas Tech and BYU, Trev. Let's make our pick. Who do we have winning the Big 12 this year? We have obviously Texas Tech as the number 1 team in the regular season. Who wins the Big 12 championship this year?
I have BYU winning in the regular season this year. I do. I have BYU beating Texas Tech in the Big 12 Conference Championship game. Here's why. At some point, 1, I love how well coached they are. 2, I think that now that BYU has seen them on multiple occasions and don't have to face them in the regular season, I think that's going to play a big role as well. It's going to be a tough battle. I don't want to make it sound like BYU is going to run away with it because they saw them twice last year, but I have them and Kalani Sitake overtaking the Red Raiders in the Big 12 Conference Championship game.
See, I should have pulled owner privileges and given my pick first because I thought I had this really I'm going to shock everybody by picking BYU and Trev's going to go Texas Tech and I'm going to come in with the BYU hammer. And you beat me to it. I agree. Look, I also think BYU is going to match up a little bit better this year than they did last year.
Agreed.
I think they're on the perimeter. I think having those big kids on the perimeter is going to be a difference maker. I think they're going to be able to throw the ball up in the air a little bit and win some of those contested catches. And Texas Tech is going to be really good. I don't know that they're going to be quite the same as they were last year. So, and I also think sometimes it's just you play a team enough times, you're eventually going to get that figured out. And I think BYU is going to be a hot team, and I think BYU is going to be a little bit more rested, I think, next year than maybe Texas Tech is going into the playoffs. I mean, they're going to have their last, so they have a bye on October 10th, and then from 17th to the 26th, they have Arizona State, Arizona, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, and TCU. That's not exactly a walk in the park slate. Now, BYU has Notre Dame and Arizona State, but then they also have UCF, Baylor, Kansas, Cincinnati, and then Utah. November 7th, they play at Utah. After that, the other 3 teams are teams that you and I have either like, 12th or lower, something like, you know what I mean? Like, so I think that helps them a little bit as well. They were pretty beat up late last year going into that Big 12 title game because they were kind of fighting for their lives a little bit. So I love that pick, Trev. Love that pick, BYU. I thought I had it, man. I thought I had the upset that was going to shock everybody.
The final piece that's going into this for BYU with me is the fact that they do face Notre Dame on October 17th. So the first time they play a very athletic team in the Big 12 championship, it's not going to be this culture shock of like, whoa, this is different than Colorado and Baylor. And they're going to know what that looks like, and they're going to be able to game plan for it. Whereas Texas Tech was the peak athletic team that they were going to face last year. That won't be the case this year if they play for the Big 12 title.
Yep. I agree.
Brian, let's dive into some Big 12 superlatives here in the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We're doing exactly the same thing that we did for the ACC, talking like coaches of the year, players of the year, all those types of things. It was a very fun conversation to have.
Can't wait, Trev. Same thing applies, same rules apply. Let's get started off, Trev. I'm actually going to go first in the Big 12. Can I go first on the Big 12 this time?
Hey, you the boss.
Because you stole all my good ones last time. I'm like, yep, I agree. I wasn't talking nearly as much as I normally talk, Trev. And you know me, I like to talk, man. I'm just kidding.
To a day in the life, bro. No.
Welcome to my world, man. I love it. Let's go top offensive player. I'm going Connor Wegman, quarterback from Houston. There's a lot of good candidates here, but I really like this Houston team. I've got him third in the league. And I think it's a similar argument that I made last segment in the ACC about Kevin Jennings, where I think Connor Wegman's going to have to carry that team a little bit. He threw for 2,700 yards last year, rushed for 700 yards last year, so over 3,400 yards of offense, 36 total touchdowns, 25 passing, 11 rushing. Love the receiving core he's going to be throwing to this year. I really like this. I really like this Houston football team, Trev, and I think that Connor Wegman is going to be a big reason for it. He just needs to make sure that the humility he had to learn by his failure at Texas A&M going to Houston, that he doesn't lose that because he had a good year last year. And now he's getting some love. You got to stay hungry. That's going to be a big thing for him. But if he can do that, I really like him as the top offensive player in the league this year.
Yeah, I like that. My pick for offensive player of the league in 26 for the Big 12 is LJ Martin, running back out of BYU.
Ooh, I like it.
If they're going to have the season that they're going to have and that I'm projecting them to have.
Big 12 champs.
Yeah, to be Big 12 champs. One way to – because I do have concerns about Bear Bachmeier's ability to consistently push the ball down the field. One way to negate that is having just an absolutely dominant ground attack with a running back like LJ Martin. So he's my offensive player of the year in the Big 12. Who's your defensive player in the Big 12 of the year?
I'm going Ben Roberts. I think the Texas Tech linebacker barrage continues. I think that Ben Roberts is going to have a big year there. There's also no David Bailey, in my opinion, on anybody's defensive line, which kind of overshadowed how good Jacob Rodriguez was last year. There were people talking about him being a Mateo-type Heisman season as a defensive player. Great story, but Ben Roberts finished the year on a very strong note. I think he's an outstanding player. And the D-line is going to be very good. So it's not like they lost all those D linemen, and so you got to block him. And he's going to have plenty of chance to run around. Having Austin Romaine next to him is going to be big. I think Ben Roberts has a monster year for the Red Raiders.
I'm sticking with the Red Raiders as well, but I'm just going one unit back. I'm going with Bryce Pollock, the cornerback from Texas Tech. He is a heck of a player. And we spent a lot of time talking about Evan Johnson, somebody who I will talk about later. But one of the reasons why Texas Tech is one of the favorites on FanDuel to win the Big 12, we're kind of going against the grain here, is because they have a really good secondary coming back. Their back seven is very strong. I think Bryce Pollock, along with Ben Roberts, one of the players that kind of drive that conversation. I'm with you completely. What about, let me see, next superlative here. What about breakout player on offense? Somebody that didn't do a whole lot last year that stepped into a big role, or like you mentioned in the ACC, maybe going from like a good conference player to like, keep an eye on this guy nationally. Who's that guy for you on offense?
Avery Johnson from Kansas State. Look, this was always supposed to be what it was going to be. Avery Johnson playing for Colin Klein. And then when he went to Texas A&M, obviously they didn't get that opportunity. I think this is the perfect coach for Avery Johnson. I think he can run. I think he can throw. I think this is going to set him loose. I think he didn't handle the pressure of last year real well. I think he handles it better this year. He's in a system that fits him better this year. He's got talent around him. I think Avery Johnson's my breakout player. He goes from being a inconsistent starter in the Big 12 to an impact player in the Big 12, and people start taking notice of him and his long blonde hair and his ability to make plays with his arm and his legs. I think Avery has a big year this year.
I love that pick. I am, once again, going to sound like a broken record here, going back to Texas Tech. I don't have them winning the Big 12 championship, but I do have them going 11-1 in the regular season. Big reason for that offensively is because I think Micah Hudson is due for a big year. The best way that you can help support Will Hammond alongside a dominant run game is to give him more weapons on the perimeter. Coy Eakin is an established player, but if Micah Hudson lives up to that 5-star, like true potential, lives up to his ceiling, I think he could be a difference maker. So I have him on offense. Who do you have for defense as a breakout player?
I'm going to go defensively. I'm going to stick with the Texas Tech. You're going to hear me talk about this a lot. A lot of guys on my defensive picks are guys that are from Texas Tech, but this is a new one, and I'm going with Adam Trick. That's who I'm going to go with as my breakout player on defense. Honestly, he's a guy that had a great year at Miami of Ohio. We talk a lot about the G5 guys going up to Power 4 level, but when I watch this kid's film, I see it translates. I see a kid that had 12.5 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks last year in the Mountain or in the MAC. I think he has very similar numbers at Texas Tech. But obviously those numbers at Texas Tech gets him, he becomes a national name again. He becomes a guy that, is all Big 12 and those kind of guys. So it's not only breakout performance going from the MAC to the Big 12, but I think he becomes more of a national name and is a big reason why this Texas Tech defense keeps rolling.
Yeah, I love that. For me, I'm going with this one, and I'm actually going to Kansas State with this pick. If you don't know his name already, I would keep an eye out for Wendell Gregory, who was at Oklahoma State last year, transferred to Kansas State. He had a really, really good year last year for the Cowboys. One of the bright spots on a really bad team.
Nobody saw it.
Yeah, I mean, dude, he was one of the bright spots. He had 32 total pressures, 11 hits plus sacks on the quarterback last year for them. I'm looking up what his tackle for loss.
12 tackles for loss.
As a redshirt freshman. Thank you for that. And he's a player that I would keep an eye out on. If Kansas State, I talked about them, Brian talked about them as being one of the teams that could vault into that conversation. A lot of the attention's going to Colin Klein and Avery Johnson, rightfully so, what they can do on offense. Defensively, he could be a difference maker for him on the edge. So
he's got to replace those two kids that went to Indiana. I mean, and they were productive. He's got to fill that big void. I like that. And if he does, people will talk about him a lot more than they did last year at Oklahoma State. Yes. That is for darn sure. 100%. For darn sure, yeah. I like that one. I dig it.
Who do you have as the top newcomer? And as a quick reminder, we're talking about either a freshman or a transfer from outside of the Big 12, which is why Wendell Gregory didn't fit this category for me because he went from Oklahoma State to Kansas State.
I have two. I have one transfer and one freshman. My transfer's Walker Lyons. This is an offense that loves to throw to the tight end, and Walker Lyons is a dude, and he is going to put up big numbers. He will be the replacement for Parker Kingston in that he will be their top pass catcher this year, in my opinion. You're going to have those big, tall JoJo Phillips and Kyler Casper taking some of that pressure off. I think Walker Lyons is going to absolutely eat in the Big 12 this year in that system, and he's going to have a big year. My high school kid, I mentioned him earlier, will be brief, Amari Latimer. Look, Cam Cook is going to get all the talk. Do not be shocked if West Virginia has 2,000-yard running backs this year, or at least close to it in that Rich Rod system. Amari Latimer is going to be an absolute dog. And although Cam Cook's going to get all the love, don't be shocked if by the end of the year it's Amari Latimer that's their top back, not Cam Cook from Jacksonville State, who had a monster year last year. Amari Latimer, as long as he stays healthy, is going to be a dude in the Big 12.
I love that pick. I love both of those picks, and I'm really glad you said Walker Lyons because he was my pick for so long, and I switched it up at the last second. Top newcomer, I'm going with Drew Bestemaker. If Oklahoma State is going to be what people think that he is going to be, he's going to have that kind of season. Now, questions around him because his two worst performances last year came against USF and Tulane, the two best teams that he faced. Now he's going to go into a You could argue a better supporting cast. Caleb Hawkins coming with him is going to be huge. But
It's the same freaking supporting cast. North Texas.
That's kind of
just picked up the North Texas offense and moved it over to Stillwater.
Literally, and so if Oklahoma State and Eric Morris are going to somewhat live up to their pretty lofty expectations in year one, Drew Messmaker is going to have to be that dude. So he's my pick on offense.
He'll be the most productive. I think we can agree on that. He'll put up the best numbers of the newcomers. There's no doubt. But if some of the people that project them to be a playoff team potential are correct, it's only because Drew Messmaker is not just putting up numbers, but putting up numbers in moments where they're impacting the outcome of games. I like that pick. I like that pick a lot. There was a lot of good options in the Big 12 for newcomers. A lot. You could have picked 3 different ones from Oklahoma State alone. You could have gone with Caleb Hawkins. You could have gone with Wyatt Young.
Yep.
You know, like you could have.
I thought about Reed Harris for a little bit at Arizona State because we're high on them.
Cam Cook, Mekhi Hughes. There's a lot of potential options there. No question about it.
Who'd you have? Same conversation, but on the defensive side of the ball, top newcomer.
This one was a lot tougher. Obviously, Adam Trick's not available to me because I have him as my new breakout player. But I went back and forth on a lot of guys. I'm going with Cade Uluave from BYU. That's my pick. I think he's going to – the production he had at Cal last year, I think translates perfectly to BYU. And number one, I think he's going to be in a well-coached system. Number one. Number two, he's going to be playing behind a big physical line that's going to allow him to fly to the football. He's a kid that was 100 tackles, 12 tackles for loss, 3 sacks last year, and had 6 pass breakups last season. Very good in coverage, gets good depth, makes good reads. Smart football player. You put him in this system with Isaiah Glasker beside him. He's going to have Brady Schoonover and Keanu Tanavasa in front of him, a great secondary. I think this kid's going to have an absolute monster season for BYU. He'll be 100-plus tackles again. He's going to be a real good newcomer, real big-time newcomer for them.
He was my pick as well, and I echo everything that you said about Cade. He's going to have a monster season for BYU this year. That is absolutely for sure. Let's talk about the top linemen on offense in the Big 12. Who's your pick there?
Bruce Mitchell, BYU. I think he's the only first-team All Big 12 guy coming back last year. I think he's the best lineman for what I think will be the best line in the Big 12. And I think, being a center, he's a leader, captain, all that kind of good stuff. He's my pick for top lineman.
Yep, I went with BYU. I just went with offensive tackle Andrew Gentry. I think I'm with you. I think they're going to have the best O-line in the Big 12.
It's going to be somebody from BYU.
Yeah, man, you could have went with either one of the guards. You could have went with Bruce Mitchell. Yeah, I'm with you completely. Yeah. How about defensive line? Who do you got? Top defensive lineman in the Big 12.
A.J. Holmes, Texas Tech. As I said, I'm going to have a very Texas Tech heavy theme here. I think A.J. Holmes is a dude. I think especially he's going into year 2 in that system. He's going to have a really good supporting cast around him. I think he absolutely cooks. Absolutely cooks.
Absolute.
And somebody just asked, what if Texas Tech gets Thomas Castellanos? He will be nowhere on these lists, in my opinion. like nowhere. So, no, not happening. Most overhyped QB in the country. There's no question about that. But A.J. Holmes is my pick. I think he's going to be an absolute beast up the middle of that D. And his performance is a big reason why I have Ben Roberts as my defensive player, because he's just going to be running to the ball unblocked a lot this year.
I also have A.J. Holmes. I have a lot of concerns about Texas Tech's remade defensive line through the portal. Having said that, A.J. Holmes has the opportunity to anchor that unit and be the foundation to wow guys like an Adam Trick are finding his footing at this level, going from Miami of Ohio to Texas Tech. I really think that could be a difference maker. A.J. Holmes is that for me as well. What about the top skilled player on offense in the Big 12? Who you got?
My top skill player, I actually am making a change because I completely forgot about somebody. I had Amari Thomas listed in the thing I gave you. L.J. Martin is my top offensive skill player. He's the best running back in the league, and if they're going to be playing for and winning the Big 12 championship, he's going to have to be the horse on that offense. And I think in a different way, I think the big receivers are going to kind of force teams to maybe play their safeties back a little bit more. They were a catch and run team last year, so you can kind of bring your safeties down a little bit. you're going to have to maybe think about dropping them safeties back if they're going to do on offense what I think they're going to do, which is throw the ball down the field a little bit more with those big, tall 6'5" receivers. So I think LJ Martin's going to have a big year. He's my top skill player in the league.
Yeah, I love that. I'm going with Texas Tech running back Cameron Dickey. I think I have a lot of concerns about Will Hammond's health. And one of the ways that you don't put the weight of the world on his shoulders is by having an excellent run game. The running back room is deeper this year, so I think in some of those bigger games, he's going to be a little bit fresher with Quentin Joyner coming back off of injury. And the number 2 running back last year, his name is escaping me, but he's also back this year. And so I think I think
Quentin Joyner also comes back.
Yep. Quentin Joyner's back off of injury. So I have
it's Jacoby Williams, by the way.
Okay.
So you're thinking
Thank you, sir. So I think that Cameron Dickey is going to have fresher legs this year with the rotation getting a little bit deeper. He's that for me on offense. Who's your top skill player on defense?
Evan Johnson, BYU cornerback. This is another tough one. Bryce Pollock was a guy that I considered, but I didn't want to completely go with the Texas Tech sweep. I think Evan Johnson is an outstanding cornerback. You could have gone with Therian Alexander, the other cornerback at BYU, but I think Evan Johnson is one of it. To me, Evan Johnson is the most underrated cornerback in college football. He's my pick. And we've talked a lot about him. I don't need to keep talking about him again. We've talked a lot about him this summer. He's my pick.
He is also my pick as well. Very, very underrated. If he had a gold helmet on, if he had a scarlet and red helmet on, if he had a crimson helmet on, he'd be getting a lot more attention this season.
Yep.
That's for sure.
Yep. I agree.
That's absolutely for sure.
I agree.
Let's talk about the top quarterback in the league. And there was a lot of candidates that were up for debate with this one. Who'd you go with?
Noah Fafita. I wasn't a Noah Fafita believer for a long time. I thought he had that one good year. We just kind of throwing the ball up to Tech McMillan. But I'll tell you what, man, that kid won me over last year, Trev. He really did. He's just a gamer. I mean, the kid just goes out there and makes plays. Had a really good season last year. Had a bit of a bounce back season. Had a little bit of a sophomore slump, in my opinion. 18 touchdowns, 12 picks in 2024. Bounced back big time last year, Trev. 3,200 yards passing, 29 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. And just even some of the games where it wasn't sexy, he just went out and made winning plays. That's a big thing for him. So I'm going Noah Fafita. Drew Mestamaker will put up the yards. Noah Fafita is the gamer. He's the kid that you want the ball in his hands at the end of a game. That's why he's my pick. And there's a lot of good quarterbacks in the Big 12 this year. I've already picked a couple of them for other things. I obviously picked Avery Johnson already, Connor Wegman. Thought about Drew Mestamaker here. There's a couple other quarterbacks that I considered for this conversation, but Devin Dampier is a guy that I'm really high on. You know that. I just don't love the supporting cast around him. The remade offensive line. You lost 2 first-round draft picks. Had a lot of back and forth here, but Noah Fafita, man, just the kid's he is to Arizona what Gunnar Stockton is to Georgia. It may not always be sexy. He won't put up 4,000 yards passing, but the kid makes plays. And I think, I'll just leave it at that. He makes a lot of plays.
It's weird to think that Noah Fafita had his sophomore slump while still having Tet McMillan. Like that, that's you wouldn't have thought that. I thought they were going to take a big step back when he left, and he got better, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah,
but I thought about.
I think part of that was he was just so reliant on Tet that he wasn't going through his reads. He was just locked in on him. And they didn't really have like a great number 2 option, where last year he had to spread the ball around. He had to read the defense. He had to take what the defense gave him. And it wasn't just, there's Tet, let me zone in on Tet, and I think that hurt him, made him Tet put up monster numbers, but I think made Noah less efficient as a quarterback.
I've gone back and forth on this one, and my answer is actually different than the list that I sent you over as well.
I see. You got yours, I got mine. We'll call it even.
Yep. The pick for me is Bear Bachmeier. If BYU is going to go out and win the Big 12, he's not going to put up the numbers that Drew Mestamaker will. He might not even put up the numbers that Devin Dampier will, because he was originally the quarterback that I was going to go with. If Utah's going to live up to my number 5 projection ranking, Devin Dampier is going to have to be the heart and soul of that team, no question about it. But when I think about Bear Bachmeier, it's going to come down to the moments for him. You know what I mean? Like, if they're going to go out and beat Texas Tech, if they're going to be competitive with Notre Dame, if they're going to go on the road and pick up some of these big wins that they have in their regular season schedule, Bear Bachmeier is going to have to make plays to where maybe we don't walk away and say, okay, yeah, he threw for 3,500 yards and rushed for 1,000. Mind you, he threw for over 3,000 yards last year. Barely. It was like 3,003. But it's going to come down to the moments. He is now a year older. I'm not one of those people who believe that what we saw from Bear Bachmeier in 2024 is just what we're going to see
as a
from
true
Bear Bachmeier
freshman,
for the rest of his
right?
career.
Exactly.
Exactly. And if Walker Lyons
And
is going to have
just
that,
not a true freshman as like a lot of the BYU freshmen are freshmen, but they're like 3 years from high school because they went on
right.
an immediate Mormon mission. He came right out of high school.
Yep.
And started as a 18-year-old true freshman, not a 20-year-old I'm married and have a kid now true freshman at B. And I'm not even saying that to mock. I mean, it's a statement of fact. He's not your typical BYU freshman.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
I think that's adds to the fact that he's not a finished product.
100%. If they're going to go out and beat Texas Tech this year, he's going to have to go and make plays that he wasn't able to make last year. If Walker Lyons is going to have the season we think that he can have, oh my goodness, the guy that transferred, Kyler Casper, has the season that we think that he's capable of having. Yeah. JoJo Phillips. I mean, they can't have breakouts without Bear Bachmeier to a degree. And so he's that quarterback for me.
His emergence this year, his growth is exactly why I have BYU beating the Texas Tech in the Big 12 title.
Yep. So he's that guy for me. Won't put up the sexy numbers, but when we look back at the season in its entirety, kind of like Riley Leonard. Like when you go back and look at the season in its entirety, it's like, fair. I mean, he made that play, he made that play, he made that play, but it was a game where he rushed for 80 yards and passed for 175.
Right. Yeah.
I could see that being Bear Bachmeier's role, so he's the guy that I went with there.
Love it.
Let's wrap up this segment. Talk about Coach of the Year. Who's that guy for you?
It's Willie Fritz. I just think he's just done a great job at Houston. I think it's going to come down to him and Kalani Sitake. I think are the two options. But Kalani Sitake won it last year. I would imagine they want to maybe give it to somebody else. I'm going Willie Fritz.
Yep, love that. He's same pick for me as well. I talked about it in the ACC. At some point, you cross the threshold of inevitability. He's kind of flown under the radar this year as one of the better coaches of the Big 12. If he does what we believe he can do this season, there's going to be no ignoring what he did with Houston. I'm with you completely.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I'll say this about Houston too is if he does it again this year, it means even more to me because they're not sneaking up on anybody this year.
Correct.
They're the hunted now. They're among the group of the hunted now. They're not going to like, oh, wow, Houston beat who? Oh, wow. What? It's now you got to win. People are prepared for you now. And that adds a little something to it.
Absolutely. Brian, to take us the rest of the way here in the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We have a daily mailbag to take us the rest of the way. Questions today are going to be geared towards the topics we talked about. Notre Dame and their outlook against the ACC and the Big 12. We previewed the entire ACC conference. We previewed the entire Big 12 conference. We gave superlatives about top players, top coaches. If there's any teams that you want us to take a deeper dive on, now's the time to ask that in the mailbag. You can put MB for mailbag or a mailbox emoji. Lets us know to set that question aside. Super chats always get bumped up to the top.
Yes, sir. Let's get started with James Delaney.
I think Virginia Tech is going to shock a ton of people because of how talented Franklin is as a coach. And Virginia Tech is going to dominate Maryland because I think Loxley hates Maryland for passing him over. Thoughts?
I do you mean Loxley hates Maryland for passing him over, or do you mean Franklin hates Maryland for passing him over? Maybe. I don't know that he hates Maryland. We'll see. Look, it's one thing to hate him. It's another thing to actually go out and stop Malik Washington. So that's a little bit of a different animal. And Trev and I both think that even with Zion Mathis, I think Maryland's going to be an improved defense this year, even with him being out. Look, I think the James Franklin narrative is interesting because there's the people that just over focus on his big game struggles. You and I have called him out about that for years. He's not an elite coach because of that. But then they'll gloss over the people that want to hammer him, rightfully so for his big game inability and how bad of an in-game coach that he is, and forget how great of a recruiter he is, how great of a motivator that he is. And after struggling early with coaching hires, he's made some really improved hires over the years, and his teams are usually relatively well coached from fundamentally sound and things like that standpoint. So I agree. I think that they're going to shock people, but that's not the reason why I think they're going to shock people. I think Franklin is a part of it, but I also think James Franklin's not going to win at Virginia Tech because he's a great coach with a bunch of average players. I think they have a talented roster as well. I think that's the part that their 3-9 roster was not a 3-9 roster. You know what I mean? Yes, it was a roster that went 3-9, but it's not a roster that should have gone 3-9. Like even the Miami game, they gave Miami as good of a game as just about anybody in the last month and a half of the season. They just didn't have the horses on offense, and Kyron Drones couldn't hit a. I mean, actually, was he even the quarterback? Yeah, they played two quarterbacks that game, I think. They couldn't hit a pass, but like they hung with Miami early, and they just got outclassed a little bit. I think you now add those Penn State, like all the players that I think some media people think are still at Penn State, and that's why they're in the top 20, are actually at Virginia Tech. Luke Reynolds, Ethan Grunkmeyer, guys like that are now at Virginia Tech. And I'm with you on that. I think they're going to be a very underrated team. And I get Trev's, they got to prove it. Totally fine. But I look at that roster and forget what we've seen in the past, and the schedule's set up nicely. Like you said, Trev, the 3 toughest games are on the road. You're going to lose those anyway. It's better to get them on the road and now have somebody else at home than have to play those 3 games at home where you maybe go 1-2 at home, maybe even 0-3 at home in those games. I think it sets up very, very well.
Yeah, absolutely. My fear with James Franklin, because I love the fit at Virginia Tech, and I think that he could do such a great job, but he is such a polarizing coach that, I mean, he could lose to Texas Tech by 2 points, like what we saw at Penn State. He could lose to Ohio State by 3 points, but like he sucks, he's overrated, fire him, get him out of town, he can't win the big game. My fear is I projected Virginia Tech to go 7-5, which that is a massive turnaround from going 3-9. My fear is if he doesn't live up to some people's expectation of being like a 9-win head coach in his first year at Virginia Tech, people will be like, he sucks, the experiment failed.
But I'll say this, I'm from Virginia. If he takes them to a bowl game this year, their fans will be like, great start. And that's ultimately what matters. Because they were so bad the last couple of years. But here's the big key. If you go 7-5, you better go 7-5 with a win over Virginia. That's the key. They don't take tolerating losing to Virginia very well, and because they haven't done it much. I mean, it's Ohio State and Michigan prior Connor Stallions on steroids. The complete one-sided nature of that rivalry is. I'm actually pulling it up, Trev. We've talked about it before, but it's Virginia Tech is up 62, 39, and 5. And going back to 1999, Virginia Tech won 31-7. They've played every year from 1999 to almost every year to 2025. The one exception was 2022. We've talked about that. That was the year the game got canceled after the tragic loss of life of one of their players. Virginia only won 3 of those games: 03, 19, and 25. If you go 7-5 and one of those wins includes a win over Virginia, their fans will say, hey, great step in the right direction, because they're going to look at the recruiting class they got coming in next year. Yeah. And they're going to look at a lot of the transfers they got are undergrads. Grunkmeyer comes back. Luke Reynolds likely comes back. I think those are things that you look at and say, they kind of had, Trev, if you look at kind of their portal class, they kind of had a similar portal class to Notre Dame in some regards, in that some of their higher end, like big name guys were younger guys. Ethan Grunkmeyer is a true sophomore. Quayshawn Bowers is a guy that has extra years of eligibility left. Luke Reynolds is a redshirt sophomore. Logan Howland, who they got at tackle from Oklahoma, has eligibility left. Kyle Altuner, who they got out of the portal last year, has eligibility left. You look at the defensive side, couple veterans on the D-line, portal guys, including some guys that were already on the team from last year, but they got Javion Hilson, who's a portal guy who's a redshirt freshman. So a lot of young, and then also you had some young guys. Malachi Williams is a portal guy that they got. It's a redshirt sophomore. Eric Mensa's got years left. Randy Adarica's got years left. So like they went out and got some younger players as well out of the portal. So it's not like, hey, you've got to win now or you're restarting. So you got a lot of portal guys that have multiple years left, plus a really good high school recruiting class coming in. So I think for him, it's just take him to a bowl game and beat Virginia. I think that's going to be the big key for the Hokies right now. And you look at James Franklin, like I said, Trev, his 2026 class ranked 30th, which is good for them, especially with the strong finish. And then right now they're ranked 20th right now at their recruiting class they're putting together now. So just got to take them to a bowl game. That's going to be the key. Now, national media is absolutely going to have the narrative that you're talking about, but that's not who matters. It's what do the money people at Virginia Tech and the fan base at Virginia Tech think? He takes them to a bowl game. That's going to be considered a big turn.
That's what I have this year. I have them going 7-5 and beating Virginia.
Yep, that'll be big. That'll be big.
From Tommy Guns, did the ACC change their tiebreaker rule, or was it something else about their process that they changed?
I don't think that. I think Jim Phillips made a big statement about how they didn't change it. I think they cleaned up a couple little things, but they didn't make any major changes. This should be the easiest thing ever. You're two teams that make it to your conference championship in the scenario where you have a tiebreaker is needed. If it's between two teams, it's whoever's ranked highest in the playoffs rankings. If it's three teams, it's the two highest, and it's not that freaking hard. You want to improve your ability to get multiple teams in the college football playoff? It should have been Miami and Virginia playing for the ACC title last year. It's just stupid. It's just Jim Phillips has got to go.
Agreed. From CJ Carr for Prez, can you take a minute to explain Notre Dame's scheduling agreement with the ACC in detail? I.e., how far in advance are games scheduled? How long is the contract, revenue, etc.?
The revenue, I'm not sure the specific number, but they get 8 figures from ESPN for being in the ACC. I think they've made over 20 in several years. So I think it's around 20-ish million for that deal. It's between 15 and 20, depending on certain things. They basically have to play minimum 4. I think it's 4, correct? Minimum 4, but usually 5 ACC teams every year. They signed the deal in 2013. I think it began in earnest, in 14 or 15. I can't remember which year it was. And then it goes to, I believe, 2035 is when I believe it goes to. And they have, I couldn't tell you the specifics of it, but there's like certain formulas for making sure that everybody gets a crack at Notre Dame. What that is specifically, I'd have to go back and look, but they have some formula, and that's something that Notre Dame has been trying to get them to change. They want it to be more of a, we want some of the better teams, but like 2037, is the last year of the contract. They have NC State, Clemson, Miami, Syracuse, and Wake Forest in 2037. So, yeah.
Good deal.
Yep.
From Tom Redinger, what are your thoughts on the Cal quarterback? Do they have a chance to make a run?
Yeah, look, the defense and the offensive line are the two big question marks for me. But I'll put it like this: Cal would be a really tough team to stop in a ACC 7-on-7 tournament.
Oh yeah,
real tough team to stop. Line play is going to be big for them. But look, I think that kid had a really good freshman year. I don't think he's like with Bear Bachmar, he hasn't peaked. And they treated this offseason. Ron Rivera is their GM, former Bears coach, and he basically treated it like an NFL offseason. We've got a young franchise quarterback. We're going to build around the young franchise quarterback. And they went out and spent money to build around it. They went out and got Ian Strong. They paid for some offensive linemen. They said, hey, if we got this young, and they paid the kid. But part of the deal was, look, yeah, I'm coming back, but you got to put something around me. And they did that. So now it's up to him to go out there and do what you do. Had a great freshman year. Now he's got to build on that. Limit some of the turnovers and the freshman mistakes, which I'm okay with. He's a freshman. And some of his mistakes were because he's too aggressive. I am okay with that as long as you eventually learn, but I'd much rather deal with a kid. We've talked about this a million times, Trevor. I'd much rather deal with a young quarterback that I got to say, hey, man, I love the willingness to make a play, but that ain't it, as opposed to, can you please throw the ball? I know the window wasn't huge, but can you give me something? Give me some guts here. He has plenty of that. And I mean, if you want to know how good he is, just go back and watch the SMU game in the last game of the year where they knocked SMU out of the ACC title game.
Yeah, he's a baller, big-bodied kid, and one of my favorite names, side note, in college football. That's a fun name to say.
Oh, it's a horrible name to say. I suck at
I
those names. Because you're good at saying those names.
Name.
I suck at saying those names. Suck at it.
From Swan, who do you think are the best 5 coaches in the ACC?
5 best coaches in the ACC. I'm going Dabo. In no particular order. There's Dabo, Jeff Brom, Mario Cristobal, Rhett Lashley, and James Franklin. I think the guy from Wake Forest is in the conversation. Tony Elliott's got to do more than one good year for me to have him in the conversation. Brent Key, again, got to give me more than one good year to be in that conversation. I think those are the clear top 5. So Dabo Sweeney, Jeff Brom, Mario Cristobal, Rhett Lashley, and James Franklin. With all due respect to Pat Narduzzi, who is definitely not in my top 5.
Yeah.
He's not way outside of it, but he's just not as good as those coaches, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's the 5, and then I think that there's a gap. I'm with you.
Yep, agree. Good question.
From Tommy Guns, are there any other instances where the new head coach hired the former head coach without him going somewhere else in between?
Yeah, T.C. Williams High School back in the 70s. Coach Yost. Actually, he wasn't at T.C. Williams, but no, I honestly can't, off the top of my head, can't think of one where he the very next year the guy basically came back as a coordinator. I can't remember that happening.
No.
I can't.
No.
Like Dirk Cutter went back to Boise State, but that was years after he left Boise State. Years. I honestly can't think of one. I'm sure it's happened, but I can't think of it.
Yeah, without going somewhere else in between, I got nothing.
Yeah, it's a good one. Good one, Tommy.
From Salty, the ACC is fighting to survive as Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and North Carolina are actively seeking paths to the higher payouts of the SEC or the Big Ten. Could it survive losing these schools?
No. It can't.
No, even
because it would give ESPN the ability to go ahead.
Yeah, even with the jumps that we're projecting SMU and Louisville to have, because it's not just what you would be losing in football; it's what you'd be losing in basketball. You're losing North Carolina in basketball,
but you're also losing TV markets. That's the other part. You're losing branded names. You're losing your 3 biggest brand names in football. You're losing your, one of your 2 biggest brand names in basketball. But it's the TV. It would also give ESPN all the ammo it needs to back out of its deal, which I think they can do in like 2030 or something like that. It kills that league.
Yep.
No, it can't survive that.
Another one from Salty. An amendment to the Federal Protect College Sports Act would give schools a 180-day window to leave their conference without a 5-year independent penalty. Would this end the ACC?
If Jim Phillips isn't able to get those teams on board for staying, yes, it would. Because it's to your last question, those teams would be the ones that would leave. The minimum. All right, let's get to some questions here. Got one from Jay Melvin.
BD, do you think Texas Tech could fall apart this year with all the issues this offseason? They don't have the leadership of Notre Dame, and their team is full of mercenaries. The stuff with Castellanos is a concern.
I think that their team has better leadership than they have at the head coach. I think their coordinators have a big role. I think that there's been a lot of distractions, but I still think they're way more talented than everybody else in the league outside of BYU. And so, yeah, I don't love what's going on. I think the Thomas Castellanos stuff is, we'll see what comes of it. But that's still a really talented roster. If they bring him in, that could be the thing that causes that team to fall apart. Because I think he's got some attitude issues that I don't know how well that goes in the locker room.
Yeah. I mean, Could they, Jay Melvin? Sure, because at this point last year, I didn't see Penn State falling apart. I didn't see
Yeah.
Clemson and Dabo Swinney going that level, and I have much higher regards for Dabo Swinney than I do Joey McGuire. So could it happen? Sure, but not something I'm willing to predict. So, but they are concerns, no doubt about it. But we'll see.
Yeah. Agree. All right, we got some more questions down here. You guys go ahead and get those in. We've got one here from Tommy Guns about Rich Rod.
Do you think Rich Rod can get West Virginia back to what they were in the mid 2000s?
As a coach, yes. Can he will he have the financial support to do that in today's era? I have no idea. That's the big question with a lot of these teams. He should have never left, first of all. But could Rich Rod, in this portal era and NIL era, go out and get some guys to keep that thing rocking and rolling? Yeah, I think he's adjusted enough to the modern game that his system now works in it. I mean, you look at what he did at Jack State. You look at even what they did last year at West Virginia. He did a bad job at Michigan, right? I mean, that was a terrible fit for him. But it's not like he hasn't been good since then. He did have the year in 2014 where he had Arizona winning 10 games and had them playing in the Pac-12 title game. I think Arizona made a huge mistake firing him, which we've talked about. He was at Jacksonville State for 3 years, helped them go from FCS to D1. They went 9-2 in his last year in the FCS, and then in his 2 years at the FBS went 9-4, 9-4. Just did a really good job. And he walked into a situation, Trev, where the year before he got there, they were 5-6. You know what I mean? So it's like, it wasn't like they were like cooking. They had one good year in like 2021, but they were a wildly up and down team. He went 9-4, 9-2, then 9-4, 9-4, and then took over the West Virginia job. And again, they had a losing record last year, but they were sneaky competitive, in my opinion. So I think he can, if he has the financial support, then he can win there. I think he can.
Yeah, agreed. This new day and age of college football is extremely tough on programs like West Virginia. I think the name of the game right now for Rich Rod is, can you have sustained success? And financial backing is a huge, huge part of that conversation. But when I'm talking about sustained success, I'm not talking about, are they a playoff team every year? Like, I just don't know if that's going to be in the cards for a team like West Virginia. What I'm thinking more of, like, every 3 years, can you make a push to compete for the Big 12 title? But then the years that you're not, can you be like a 9-win team? Can you be an 8-win team? It's not, hey, 1 year they go 10-2, but then the 2 years following, when everybody leaves, they're a 5-7 team, they're a 4-8 team. That's what I mean, sustained success.
I do believe that in the current Big 12, if they have financial support, he can have them being on the same level as what Texas Tech and BYU and Arizona State can be. Where, to your point, Trev, do they dominate it where they're an 11, 12-win team and they're winning it every year like Oklahoma did for 20 years? No. But are they a team where every year that team has a chance to go win their league and make it to the playoff? Yes.
Sure.
Do they make it every year? No. Can they be in the conversation for it every year? Absolutely. If, as Trev and I said, they get the financial backing. Now, they've thrown some money out to some guys. Look, they got some big portal pickups. They had a great portal class, and Amari Latimer didn't come cheap. I'll be pretty confident saying that. So, yeah. And I think, again, he's got that gimmicky offense in a league where that can work. That's the thing, Trev. It's got to be in the right league. And I think he's in the right league for his stuff to work.
Yeah,
I do.
For sure. From Timecone, which conference has the biggest problems keeping a roster together across seasons? Big 12 might be the worst, but maybe that's not true. I'll take this one, actually. Timecone, I think you're onto something, but when they have issues keeping a roster together, I think it's because they're viewed as an inferior league, so their rosters get poached all the time. That's what it is. It's the SEC and the Big Ten are looking to conferences like the Big 12 to poach coaches, to poach players. I mean, that is the unfortunate reality of being one of those teams. That's why sustained success in that league is extremely difficult. Like we just got done talking about West Virginia. It's if you have a good season at a school like a West Virginia or a Houston or a Baylor, you're going to be getting hit up by Tennessee and Alabama and Notre Dame and Ohio State, and if you're a fit, to come and be a part of that roster. I think the Big 12 and programs like that, not as much to the degree as the G5, especially from a coaching standpoint, but I would say it's the Big 12 for sure.
I think the other part of it is the Big 12, for the most part, you didn't see a bunch of Texas Tech players get rated by the SEC because they can pay their player. Hey, what are they offering you? Oh, we can match that, no problem. It's everybody else.
Yeah.
Because their schools can't afford to keep they're just not committed to it, whether or they don't have. I don't know what the answer is at some of these schools. For some of the schools, it's we have the money. Oklahoma State has the money. They're just not going to give it to a coach that they no longer support and believe in.
Right.
That's part of it too. So, but Iowa State's never going to be able to compete. If Penn State wants an Iowa State player, they're going to lose that player. And Penn State's not even a rich Big Ten program. Like SEC, top ACC, top Big Ten schools. If they want an Iowa State player, they're going to lose that guy. They can't. They don't have the money to do that. There's a lot of teams like that. Not all of them. A lot of teams like that. And that's part of the problem is that you just don't have the money to keep those guys. It's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is this what you mean when you say it's an inferior league? Meaning like the players view it as an inferior league, so they're willing to jump up to a bigger league? Is that kind of, like, oh, I'm at Baylor. Hey, Mississippi State came calling. Ole Miss came calling. That's a better league. I'm going to bounce to that league. Is that kind of what you meant by that? Because, when you said it's an inferior league?
Yeah, I would say like the Big Ten and the SEC view it as an inferior league. Like
I get that. I'm just asking for clarification. What does that have to do with players leaving the Big 12?
I was talking more so like because of the perception from the Big Ten and the ACC and how they view the Big 12, they feel like they can just go poach their players because like you'd rather play for us.
It's easier to go get a kid from a good kid from Baylor than it is to go get a good kid from like LA. Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, because
so they're more likely to raid the league. Got it.
Yeah, because the recruiting pitch is like, hey, dude, we're Tennessee. Why are you playing at Kansas? Like,
right. That makes sense. Well, and I mean, Kansas State's one of the few teams that's been able to keep a kid. Remember, Tennessee went hard after Avery Johnson last year, and Kansas State was able to keep him. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I was like, what does the Big Ten and SEC have to do with it? But that makes total sense. It's like if there's a good kid in that league, we're gonna go get him. Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. I dig that. Yeah. Ant VR says, Brian, saw you on Mac and Cube. Surprised McElroy wanted you back. I was too. So I'll be honest. So I got hit up yesterday about going on their show today, and I just kind of assumed that Greg wasn't going to be on it, or Greg wasn't going to be answering a lot of the questions. But he asked them all, and it was a good conversation. So I was happy, and it wasn't like Trev, you and I kind of joked about what my response is going to be. Like, hey, I'm glad I was able to rebuild my credibility since last December. But no, it's good football talk. And that's where Greg is in this. I've been on that show several times, and every single conversation has been exactly like it was today. Great football talk, except for that one that had to do with Bama. That's his soft spot. But when he's talking about like today, I mean, good questions, and you can tell he's like trying to do some homework on Notre Dame, and as we've said all along, he's always had respect for Notre Dame. Last couple of years, he's praised Notre Dame like crazy. It's just in that one conversation about Bama, I think he kind of got in his feels a little bit, but overall, like I said, what's so disappointing about it is because we've had really good conversations in the past about a lot of other things, and he's always has a great thing to say about Notre Dame. He had every defensive position ranked in his top 5, actually top 3 or 4, I think, this year. So he's very high on Notre Dame, and I was glad that we were able to have a good, fun conversation. I was glad they asked me back. I've said on the show, there's no way I'm going back on that show. Not because I didn't want to go back on it, because I didn't think they were ever going to ask me again. But it was awesome, and I'm glad they did, and I'm glad Craig and I were able to have some good football talk. It was good.
Love it.
Yep. All right, let's get to some more. Here we go.
From Salty, can anyone from the ACC's secondary tiers, such as SMU, Louisville, or Clemson, realistically upset the Hurricanes?
I mean, brother, 2 of those 3 teams beat Miami last year.
Yeah.
One of them beat Miami in Miami. So, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and I would also hesitate to call it the secondary tier. I mean, SMU and Clemson have played for the ACC title more recently than Miami has. I mean, that's like, I understand where you're coming from here because, like, Miami played for the title last year. Like, I get it. It's not a blasphemous thing to say, but that's what's weird is in the ACC, I don't think that there's a clear cut first tier, and then this is the second tier. Like, I think it's like there's just a group of people fighting. There's a group of teams fighting for what should be the first tier, but I don't know if it's as clear cut as the other. Whereas the Big 12, it's yeah, I think the top tier is BYU and Texas Tech. And then it's who comes after that. The Big Ten, the tier one is Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana, and then it's who comes after that. Whereas the ACC, it's kind of like people are now fighting to be in the tier one. There's no clear separation in my eyes.
I think Miami is the best team in the ACC, but I don't think it's like it was when Clemson was rolling from like 16 to 19 where there was nobody even close to them.
Sure.
Miami could get to that point. They're recruiting like a team that wants to get to that point. They're not there yet. And I also think those other teams are getting better. I think that's a factor in the conversation as well.
Yeah.
All right, we got another one from, it's a good from Salty. Here's one. Who will have a better record, Virginia or Virginia Tech? Obviously, from our previous conversation, Trevor thinks that Virginia will have a better record in the league. I think Virginia Tech will. I could see a world based on their non-conference schedule that Virginia Tech has the better record in the league, but their record in out overall is either the same or maybe Virginia's slightly better. I could see that. Virginia's non-conference is Norfolk State, Delaware, and West Virginia. Whereas, when you look at Virginia Tech's schedule, they have Old Dominion, VMI. They play at Maryland. So it's kind of like, the West Virginia game is going to be in North Carolina, I believe. So it's like that could be the difference there is that part. But
oh, yeah, because aren't they playing like the Duke's Mayo Classic or whatever?
Yeah. Which, I'm sorry, all those kickoff classic games should be week 1. Or even week 0 should be reserved for like 3 to 4 kickoff classic games. That's all. It should be like a noon, a 3, a 7:30, and then maybe like a West Coast one at 10 that's like kickoff classics. And like they used to have those. That's the only people that should be playing in week 0 ever are those teams. And you can only play in it like once every X number of years. There shouldn't be any other week 0 games, in my opinion, outside of those things. Just my little 2 cents.
Sure. I have Virginia with the better record, but also losing to Virginia Tech.
Yep. Let's get to so Jay Melvin asked this about Thomas Castellanos. He said, is he better than the Hammond dude? I'll let you give your thoughts first, and then I'll give mine.
I think he's a better overall athlete. I don't think he's the better quarterback. And it's not like Will Hammond's a stiff in the pocket either. Thomas Castellanos has just made his bread and butter off of being a dual threat quarterback. But I don't think Thomas Castellanos, if we're talking like overall ceilings of who could be better, I don't think he holds a candle to what Will Hammond can do as a passer. And that's what's going to set him apart. You're bringing back Micah Hudson and Coy Eakin, and didn't they bring in Kenny Johnson? Or am I thinking of a different team? Yeah.
Texas Tech, yeah. Kenny Johnson.
Yeah, Texas Tech brought in Kenny Johnson. You basically nullify that if you go out and bring in Thomas Castellanos, in my opinion. I firmly believe that. So, no, I don't think he's better than Will Hammond.
Well, they also got Malcolm Simmons from Auburn. They got Dante Lee from Liberty out of the portal. Like, they had a very good portal here. So, yeah. All right, let's get to the last few here, Trev. We got, let's see here. Here's one.
Following their 10-win season, Houston returns 11 starters, including quarterback Connor Wegman. Will their revamped offensive line allow Willie Fritz to get them into the Big 12 championship game? It's definitely a possibility, Salty. I mean, you're listening to two people who are extremely high on Houston. I think I had them at 4. Brian had them at 3 in some of those orders. And, I mean, they're a couple games away from potentially breaking through that ceiling. I'm very high on what Houston could do this year. I mean, look, I'm pretty confident that the Big 12 championship game is going to be Texas Tech and BYU. I was also very confident last year it was going to be Arizona State and Kansas State. Doesn't mean that that's what it's going to be this upcoming season. When I look at what Houston has on the docket, they have opportunities to vault themselves up. Their 2 biggest games are on the road against Texas Tech and on the road against Kansas State. I mean, I have Houston going 10-2, 7-2 in conference. They just don't lose to one of Kansas State and Texas Tech in my projection. They put themselves in a position to play for that championship. So, will it allow them for it? Yeah. I mean, they bring back all the right pieces, and I think Willie Fritz is a heck of a head coach. He's our prediction to win the Big 12 Coach of the Year. So, yeah, they absolutely have an opportunity to play for the Big 12 Conference Championship.
Agree completely. Look, Thomas, let me respond to that last question from Jay Melvin. Do I think that Thomas Castellanos is a better quarterback from a playmaking standpoint than Will Hammond? I do. He's certainly more experienced. Will Hammond's a bit of an unknown, but at the same time, some guys just aren't worth the risk and the headache. He hasn't been with the team all fall camp. He hasn't been with the team in the spring. You're going to, throw him into the lineup and then to be your starter for all year? He's not good enough to walk in 2 weeks before the first game, learn the offense, and be a good football player. He's not. You know what I mean? Like, he's not that kind of player. And number two, if, let's say, he comes in and he's just holding water till Will Hammond's healthy, what kind of attitude do you think he's going to have in the locker room if you go to the other quarterback?
Yes.
You're going to have to kick him off the team.
Yep. Nor would he agree to go to Lubbock if it's for anything short of starting. Like, I saw other people talk about, oh, they bring him in for depth. It's like, you think a player like Thomas Castellanos is going to come in and just sit the bench? Not a chance. Not a chance that happens. I think that would throw a wrench in the locker room. I agree wholeheartedly.
Yep. Last couple before we get out of here, Trev.
From Salty, will Mike Norvell at Florida State get the fast turnaround with an entirely overhauled roster necessary to save his job?
Trev, you don't think so, and I'm on the fence. I've got him kind of right in the middle. I think to Trevor's point, we see Florida State differently in that I tried to take the emotion out of it that Trev put into it, which I think he's spot on about. But you can't ignore the fact, what if they start 1-2? What if they lose to SMU and at home and then lose to Alabama and they're 1-2? Does that team rebound and win at Louisville, at Miami, at Pitt, or in home games against Virginia, Clemson, NC State, and Florida? I think they got to win one of those first games. So, like, I tried not to factor that in as much as Trevor did, but Trevor is spot on in that if they start slow, there's a chance that they just check out and fall apart. So they've got to get one of those big early wins, Trev, especially the home game against SMU. Yes. If they do that and lose to 10-14 to Bama on the road, they're fine because they come home the next week. They got Central Arkansas, then they got Virginia at home. There's a chance they're going to that back-to-back stretch against Louisville and Miami, 4-1. Maybe that's enough, but I just don't know. Is 8-4, 7-5 really the kind of turnaround to save his job? Depends on whether or not the boosters are willing to pony up the money to buy him out. That's really what it comes down to for me. I think that's the whole reason. Anything less than 9 wins comes down to what's the appetite for the FSU boosters to buy him out. 8-4 shouldn't save your job at Florida State. Like, what saved Brian Kelly's job the year after 2016? If they go 8-4 in 2017, do you think Brian Kelly stays on as Notre Dame's coach? I don't. Because think about who they would have had to lose to. What other game would they? I mean, I don't know if that works. Brian Kelly went 9-3 and then won a bowl game the next year. That's what saved his job. And then, of course, the year after that, they go 11-2, and then all of a sudden 10-plus wins is the norm. 8-4 is not saving your bacon.
No, and unfortunately, and the unfortunate truth for a blue blood program like Florida State, if that is good enough to keep his job, then that tells me that Florida State as an institution just doesn't really care about football like that anymore, which is really upsetting because they're one of the programs that I believe that college football is better when Florida State is good, and the ACC in part runs through Tallahassee. But no, I mean, look, you're spot on with the SMU thing. I'm not putting any weight into what happens at Alabama. All signs point if it is a close game with Alabama, that tells me more about Alabama than it does about Florida State. SMU is going to be an absolutely huge game. Like if Alabama comes into that game and isn't just absolutely livid about with the embarrassment of what happened last year in week 1, and they're lackadaisical about it, and they just come through and they can't pick up a big win against Mike Norvell and Florida State in Tuscaloosa, that tells me more about Alabama than it does Florida State.
Agree completely. I used to be very much into that same mantra, Trev, but I've seen so many teams not respond well to that, especially when you're looking at a roster with a bunch of dudes who weren't even on the freaking team last year when that game got played. So it's like, it's harder to do that now. But I am with you. Bama hasn't, meaning Florida State players, but Bama should beat Florida State and beat them convincingly, 10 plus points, in my opinion. Yeah.
Sure.
Trev, let's do that. This is an interesting one from Tommy Guns. Let's get this one, and then we'll get out of here.
Who's going to be the ACC upset specialist, i.e., a team with 4 losses or so but beats Miami, SMU, etc.?
This is a great question because this is kind of some of the things that Trev and I were talking about. But there's a couple teams in the ACC that could be that way. Stanford could be a team that pulls off an upset or two. Wake Forest is a team that, we have them losing a lot of those road games, which they could win and be a bit of an upset specialist. And the other one's NC State for me. Those are teams that I think are going to, and then Cal. Those are my 4 that, going to have maybe 4+ losses, but they're just going to have some wins where you're like, dude, if they could just do that more often, and 4 lost teams with big wins. Louisville, anyone? You know what I mean? Like, that's been their MO, dude. They lose 4 games. They have 2 huge wins.
Right. They have 2 of the best wins in conference, and they also have 3 of the worst losses in conference. That's kind of just
That's Louisville, man. That's been their MO.
The last team, and it's because of the way that their schedule shapes up, and I think they have good enough pieces to do this. I'm keeping my eye on Syracuse. I like Fran Brown as a head coach, and you get a lot of your tough games in the Dome. There's something about just playing in the Dome kind of gives weird vibes a little bit. I mean, you get Louisville in the Dome, SMU in the Dome, you get Notre Dame in the Dome, Clemson. I mean, they're a team where I love their corners, Demetrius Samuel and Chris Peele. Chris Peele's one of the better cornerbacks in the ACC. Steve Angeli comes back healthy, and he has a group of very underrated skill talent where there's not a whole lot of film out on him right now. Now, there will be as the season goes along. They're my dark horse ACC upset specialist. I think a lot of people are going to overlook them for how they finished last year. But let's not forget they battled Tennessee and beat Clemson, who on paper was the better football team than them last year, and they beat them soundly in Death Valley last year. So they're my dark horse ACC upset specialist. That's a good question, Tommy.
Yeah, it's a great way to end, Tommy. So, Trev, that'll do her. Tomorrow, Big Ten and SEC, y'all. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
Not going to want to miss it. Not going to want to miss me project Ohio State's 7-5 season. That one was for you.
Woo, boy. Trev coming in hot.
But, folks, that will do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.
Is Luke Fickell coming back to coach the Buckeyes? That's the last time they had that kind of season. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's a good point. No, it's all fun for our guy Archer, resident Ohio State fan in the chat. But, folks, that'll do it for us here today. Guys, go live on IB Nation Sports Beat tonight at 5:05 p.m. Brian and I are going to be back tomorrow. We're basically doing the same thing we did today with the Big Ten in the SEC. Not going to want to miss that one. On your way out of the show, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Be sure to share this podcast with your friends, family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, with the season right around the corner, the best way to support what we do here and the best way to stay in tune is be a premium message board subscriber at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until tomorrow at noon, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.